big dent in it? The bags gave way, the box
Like
is
the
next
onions.
to
I can do these, Lauren, if you want.
you. Okay, good. Good evening, Millis. It is Friday, 24th in the year 2020. It is leap year week, and we are delighted to welcome you to this week's Select Board meeting. We have just adjourned from executive session, and we will begin this segment of our meeting with announcements, and I will defer to Karen Beret to my right. Oh, I should do introductions, right? Because everybody doesn't know who we are. So, to my immediate left, James McCaffrey. To my far left, your right, Peter Germain. To my right, your left, Michael Gazinski, our town administrator, and Karen Beret, our director of operations. And you have the floor, Karen.
All right, so we're starting off tonight. We have a few announcements. One is our annual Millis Beautification Day is coming up. That is sponsored by the Lions Club and the Garden Club. It will be on May 2nd from 9 a.m. to noon. Registration will start at Town Hall at 8 a.m. It's to help clean up public areas around town, including parks, playgrounds, the side of roadways, picnic areas. For more information, you can contact Jen Donahue at 508-667-4326. This poster is actually up on our website, which unfortunately was not in service today, but once it's back in service, you can certainly go there and check it out for any information that you need. And we encourage everyone to participate. It's always a good day. Also, let's see, we have a Millis Community Blood Drive. This is actually part of a senior project by Kayleen Adams. The Red Cross will be here at the Millis Town Hall Gym on Friday, March 13th. Don't be afraid of the date. 11 a.m. to 4 p.m., and we encourage everyone who's able to come and give blood. They're always in need. And you'll be supporting another senior, which is a wonderful opportunity. So saying that...
Just to be clear, Millis Town Hall business offices close at 12:30, so
Correct,
this
but
will be open.
Right, but the gym will be available and open, and we'll have people here to be doing the drive for you. Saying that, we actually have one of our...
Yes. Oh, sure.
Oh, yeah.
And last minute, skidding in with an announcement for your town is our town clerk, Lisa Harden.
Good evening. I'm Lisa Harden, the town clerk. I just wanted to remind everyone that this week, every day, we have early voting in room 130 in the town hall. It's during regular business hours, 8:30 to 4:30, plus tonight and Wednesday till 7:30 and Friday till 5:30.
Oh.
And then this is voting for the presidential primary. And then next Tuesday is the actual election day, if you prefer to come in, and we'll be open 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other announcements, my colleagues? At all? Okay. Moving right along.
Give me one moment, I'm just trying to plug this in.
Karen is putting this together. So we have a member of the class of 2020, Ella Borse, seated before us, and she is going to offer a presentation and an appeal to the town. For those seniors who are looking for the select board as a venue to reach out to the town, it is important that your presentation be cleared by the superintendent or her designee in advance, and there's a process to getting on the agenda, and your presentation has to include contact information, otherwise people don't know how to heed the call of action. So Ella, you have the floor.
Hi, my name is Ella Borst, and I'm a senior at Millis High School. And for my senior project, I am hoping to put a donation bin for the Millis Food Pantry in the town hall. And I would like to have a designated space in the town hall for people to be able to drop off donations for the food pantry.
Sorry, we're having a filming. Here we go.
Gosh.
Here you go, Ella.
I would build a drop-off box myself, and I would like to put it in the main hallway because the town hall is a very popular place for people in town, and I think a lot of people forget that the food pantry is always looking for donations, and it'd be a really good opportunity to get more donations for the food pantry.
So what do you want people to do during early voting week?
I would like, later I have a flyer, but I would like people to bring a canned good with them when they come to vote, because I figured the amount of people that come to vote in the elections, some of them could at least bring something, and even if they don't bring something, they would see that the box is there and they could bring something in the future, so they know that it's always there. And I plan on advertising the box. It's by sending out a message through listserv and in Facebook groups such as Millis Moms and Millis Public Forum. And I would also put something out on Twitter and Instagram and put flyers around the school and around different places, such as the library.
And how long will this be going on for? Ooh, what a great flyer.
I'm hoping to kick it off on March 3rd with the election, and then I was hoping to leave it there for a long amount of time and hopefully get a lot of donations for the food pantry.
I just want to add in, Ella, that Ella did she came to me, and Kathy Smith happened to be in the clerk's office at the time, so we actually went out and checked out a good space. So there is an available space kind of across from where the pet donations are, which is a great space to put the box, we're hoping. And Paul Sims is going to move some things for us. And I know you've been working on the box with your grandfather, right? Actually building it? Which is kind of exciting.
I like working with grandfathers.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. We're going kind of offside. So here's,
Or I
is
should
that
say
the
people
box?
who work with grandfathers, that's a good thing.
That's right.
You may move into that category someday.
No, I think I've comfortably arrived, yes.
Yes, Ella's grandfather is wonderful. So the box is,
So it would have similar dimensions to the current pet food donation bin because I figured that got approved, so that was a good thing to base it off of. And I would build it with my grandfather, and we actually started building this weekend because we wanted to get a head start if I did get approval. And it would be a different color and size, but the same idea as the picture. And we started building, and it was a little bulkier than we thought would be acceptable for the space out there. So I think I'm going to end up donating that box to the food pantry for their donation bin and find something more compact that would fit better in the town hall.
So you said you wanted this to kick off on March 3rd, but it sounds like with early voting, you might have a box that you could put in place now?
Yes,
So early voting, when you come in to early vote,
yes,
bring
it will
a
be
can.
ready.
So Ella, as you can see, the select board thinks that this is a great idea and has a little donation to make to get your effort started, complete with a box. So hopefully you can take these and put them to good use. And do my colleagues have any questions?
No, congratulations. Good work.
Thank you.
Excellent. Go for it.
That makes a lot of sense to have this going on at a time when people will be coming to town hall. We have a question from the floor.
Lisa Harden, the town clerk. My only concern is that there's a lot of traffic in the hall, and I'm not completely sure what the size of it is, and I just don't want it to be sticking out where people are going to be bumping into it, that's all.
Right.
I don't know if you want to respond to that, Ella, or I can.
It'll be very compact because we tried to make the one out of wood and I thought that it was too bulky, so we stopped with that. And it will definitely be like the same dimensions as the pet food box, just to make sure it's like out of the way and it won't be like over the carpet or in the way.
Okay.
She did come, and yeah, when she came, and then she came again last week, Ella, and did some more measuring, so we measured so that it would be right by the bench there, the old church pew, actually, as our bench, but it fits right there, so I think it'll be a good spot, and I think it's a great idea. And she came to me with this a while back, and I thought it was wonderful, so I'm glad to see that it's coming to fruition.
Also, I'd heard that there's a possibility that someone else could be talked into keeping track of what's in the box after you graduate.
Yes, I was hoping to pass it on to the members of the Leo's Club as part of like, they do a lot of community service, so I thought it would be a good thing for them.
Okay.
Well, it sounds like you've answered everybody's questions, and so you can get started by collecting these things. Do my colleagues have any objections or concerns?
No?
No?
No.
So vote and bring a can. I can say, my husband actually volunteers at the food pantry. There are over 100 families in our town who rely on this source. So I hope you're very successful, and thank you very much for taking this on. Thank you. And here's your home movie for your graduation project. Congratulations, Ella and Mom.
Thank you. Thanks for filming up close.
Okay,
Thank you.
Treasure.
there you go. There's your box.
Yeah, you
Sure. All right.
Thank you so much for all the shows.
Next up is, scrolling, sorry. Let us know how you do. We have a recommendation from the Director of the Council on Aging to appoint Elizabeth Derwin to a vacant board position. Do you want to talk about this?
Sure. I do have, thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a memo here from Patty Kao. The Council on Aging would like to recommend Elizabeth Derwin for the COA board position. Elizabeth is currently involved with volunteer activities at the VA and the Millis Food Pantry. Her involvement with the food pantry is quite extensive. We believe her organizational skills, as well as her commitment to helping citizens of Millis, is going to be greatly appreciated by our board members and our older residents. We ask that you consider her favorably. Thank you, Patty Kao, Director, Millis Council on Aging.
We should also mention that, according to the paperwork, Ms. Derwin also has taught English as a second language at Rosie's Place in Boston and has worked as a food pantry worker and an ambassador at the West Roxbury VA. So it sounds like she has some nice, well-rounded experience to bring to this position. But I don't think she's in our audience, is she? No, I don't think so. Do we have a motion to accept this recommendation?
Thank you. Question? Oh, no, we already did that.
And Mr. McKay, you can get everybody set up. That would be great.
Madam Chair, I make
Yes,
a
sir.
motion, is this be a appointment till June 30th?
Yes.
We have a resignation, or we're just filling the position?
You know what, I'm not sure, Tim, I have to be honest. I know she said she
But
had
this
an
is an
opening.
annual appointment, so.
It is an annual appointment, correct.
All right, so I make a motion that the board appoint Elizabeth Derwin as a member of the Council on Aging Board for the term to expire on June 30th.
Second.
So moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carries with our gratitude to Elizabeth Derwin for joining the Council on Aging team. And we are setting up a presentation right now. I'm going to provide some background while this is going on. There have been public discussions here as to our town's status for our sewer capacity, the formula of which is set by the Charles River Pollution Control District and enables Millis to have access to the necessary system to purify water. And we've had a detailed presentation by town engineer Mike Carter from GCG Engineering, who went through the process of how that calculation is computed and where Millis stands. And the upshot of that is that there were 3 strategies for town leadership to consider, because we are in fact on paper at our max with respect to current and forecast developments. And we don't set the rules, we follow the rules, and the rules are advocated in part by the professionals seated before us, but I only see 2 of the 3. Is Doug joining the table or not joining the table?
I figured we'd let them put the presentation on, and then we will come up and join them.
That's perfectly fine. So seated before us is Elizabeth Tagliari, the Executive Director, and Kristen, oh my goodness, not a chance.
Maccheroni.
Thank you very much. Kristen Maccheroni, who is the District Engineer, and seated demurely in the back is the Chairman of the Board of Commissioners, Doug Downing. The Charles River Pollution Control District,
As well as the Vice Chair, Dave Formato, Franklin Commissioner.
well, thank you for coming. Very nice to have you in Millis. So we have asked these experts to come before the board with their credentials, their knowledge, and some background, because we do have developers who are perplexed by the fact that on paper our capacity numbers say one thing when in fact it's their contention that if given the resources to compute it, that actual consumption would not hit those numbers. So we just want to be very transparent about where we're at, where we are, and what our options are going forward. So we thank Liz and Kristen for stepping forward.
Okay, great.
You have the floor. Please bring the microphones to you.
Yeah.
There we go.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.
All right, so today I just wanted to provide, like Lauren said, a background on, who the district is, what we do, and then talk about the town of Millis's sewer flow to the district and their capacity at the treatment plant. So, just a little background. So the Charles River Pollution Control District was established in 1973 by the towns of Franklin and Medway. In 1979, the wastewater began treatment. In the late 1990s, the treatment plant was partially upgraded. And then we just completed a major upgrade in 2016, which was for replacing aging infrastructure. A lot of the infrastructure was original, and then to meet the more stringent phosphorus limits that we had in our NIPD's permit. And we are currently designed to treat and permitted to treat and discharge 5.7 million gallons per day. So we are a regional facility. So here we have a map of the 4 towns. Oh, it's not going to show up. That's okay. So in the lower right corner of Medway, near the Millis line and Franklin line, is the treatment facility in the blue tank there. And the dark blue lines are the district's owned interceptors. So those are the large pipes, 3-4 feet in diameter, that are like the major trunk lines to collect the sewer from the towns. And the light brown lines are the town-owned sewers. And so those town-owned sewers are owned and maintained by each community. And so you can see in Millis, most of the sewer is concentrated to the center of town, and most of that comes in along Route 109 into our one of our interceptors there. And there's a little bit in Millis off of Farm Street, and then a little bit off of Village Street as well. So this is an aerial view of the district's treatment facility. So we are an advanced treatment facility. We have very stringent phosphorus limits as 0.10 milligrams per liter in the summer, which is pretty much as low as it goes for treatment. And so we have a number of different processes that help us get there. We have physical processes where we have screenings, infiltration. We have we have the circular tanks you'll see provide settling for any organics and solids that are in the wastewater. And in the upper right corner, or left corner, you'll see 2 tanks there. Those are for the what we call activated sludge process. That's where the microorganisms treat the wastewater. It actually consumes the organics while it's flowing through. And then we also have a chemical that we use so we can maintain our pH in the system. We can remove phosphorus with the chemicals. And then we also do disinfection prior to discharge into the Charles River. We discharge into the upper Charles River after Populatic Pond, and then the discharge actually makes its way with the Charles River into Boston. So that's why we have those high, or those low phosphorus limits and the stringent limits there. And you'll see
Can I
too.
just ask you,
Absolutely.
so just for purposes of discussion here tonight, and folks will understand, this treatment is being discharged upriver from us.
Yes, yes.
So the Charles River that flows by through Millis is the recipient of this effluent that is well treated by all you folks in the Charles River Pollution Control District.
Yep, that's correct.
So not only does Boston get the benefit of it, for which I'm sure they're more than happy to pay us, but not so much, we get the benefit of it too because we're upriver.
Exactly. So yeah, you have the
We're
the
downriver
clean
from the-
downriver.
Right.
Yep, you have the clean water for recreational use and things like that. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. And I just want to mention too, we have underground tunnels on site, and that main building is 3 stories. We have a lot of pumps, a lot of equipment that we have to support and treat that wastewater. So just a little history with the town of Millis. So 1983, about 10 years after the district was formed, Millis purchased 500,000 gallons of treatment capacity from both the towns of Medway and Franklin. And then in 2011, so recently, purchased additional capacity from the town of Franklin to bring the total plant total capacity in the treatment plant to the 0.628 million gallons per day. So here is the, flows from Millis over the last 4 years. These are average daily flows, and we also have the rainfall as well there. You'll see in 2018 that the flow increased quite a bit. We did see that in that year there's a lot of rainfall, especially concentrated in the fall and early winter months, so that we believe is a result from that. What we did here is we then looked at the last 3 year of the daily average flow from those calendar years, which is the 0.406 million gallons per day. And then we used from the town of Millis, gave us the information on the approved future connections and then some of the pending future connections. Those are based on the 110 gallons per day per bedroom, which is industry standard. All the 4 towns use that number in their projections for capacity. And then we...
May I just ask, is that industry standard just for the Charles River Pollution Control District, or is that industry standard DEP?
With DEP.
EPA?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's with DEP.
Okay.
Across the state. It's a number to use for planning purposes, the Title V standard.
Is there any discharge treatment plant in the Commonwealth that uses less than that?
I'm not aware of any that do.
Let me turn the question around. Are you aware of others that are using it? You said industry standard is not
Mm-hmm.
quite the same thing as universally used, but that's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah. Yes, I know, with speaking with other engineers, they use, that 110 gallon per day per bedroom. You have to use some sort of flow, and
Right.
that is, a good, planning purposes flow rate to use.
I'm not sure good is the right answer, but I mean, at this case, that's what you're using.
It is.
And it's using it not simply because it's industry standard, but because it is, the question, required by DEP to keep your permit or what? I'm not
That's,
trying to cross-examine you.
No, that's
We really
okay,
need to get
yeah.
underneath this. That's what we're trying to
Absolutely.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
I think that if we talk to DEP, they would recommend using this number. It's not, there isn't anything mandated, but it is, that Title V standard is from Mass DEP.
May I ask another question? You mentioned a few years ago that you expanded the plant and capacity, and I noticed that the last time we purchased any was 2011. Were we part of the planning process for plant expansion, and were we involved in that, and did we choose not to purchase any additional, or is there any in reserve that we can purchase?
Yeah, so the most recent upgrade we did not expand and add any additional capacity. It maintained the 5.7 million gallons per day and just upgraded the equipment on site.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we paid our fair share of that.
And you are right now
We
too.
are
'cause-
paying it, yeah.
Yes, yeah, because it's a 20-year.
It
Yeah.
goes into the rates.
Yeah. And so, yeah, and we did come, before the board in 2015 and 2011, talking about that upgrade and the capital assessments that increased then, yeah. So moving on with this, when you add the 3-year average daily flow and the future, projected connections, it does bring Millis to their capacity. And I know that is the discussion for today. I think I'm going to just go to the next slide, which is some items that the town, can consider, to try and, lower the flow coming to the plant. One thing is to continue removing infiltration and inflow from the collection system. So infiltration is water, groundwater that's entering the collection system through cracks in the pipe. Different places are manhole defects. And inflow is when you have, connections, illegal connections from sump pumps or from roof drains that are coming in. So it's basically either stormwater or groundwater entering the collection system. And that's clean water that really just adds hydraulics to the treatment facility. And, if the town can remove that, I&I, it will free up, capacity for actual sewer flow. Another thing to do is just to continue to evaluate the sewer flows as more connections are made that are in that projection. That'll be included in the flows, and we can take off the capacity that's held on for them, and to see and evaluate if there is more capacity. Another thing is to specify a time frame, when a project is approved of, you have X amount of years to connect. That way the capacity isn't held indefinitely. It has a time frame and an earmarked time frame for that.
I'd like to just stop right there and ask if there are other communities, either within the Charles River Pollution Control District or elsewhere across the state, that you are aware has implemented sunset laws, and any knowledge that you have about how those are implemented.
Yeah, I know the town of Bellingham does have a time frame on their, the connection. I don't know if you recall, Kristen, the time, if it was.
No, I didn't know,
Okay.
yeah.
But it is, the town of Bellingham does have that.
Thank you.
The other thing is establishing an infiltration and inflow fee that can, during the sewer connection fee process, that money can be used, to fund I&I projects in the town that have already been, you've determined where I&I exists, you've looked at where, the major contributors are, and that money can be used to remove I&I. That actually will can offset those new sewer connection flows by removing the I&I. The town of Franklin does do this and has this, so they, would be a good resource to reach out to get more information on that. And then lastly, I know the town of Millis has, the betterments, for sewer, people who have sewer in front of their, properties that haven't connected yet. And so it's a question of, does the town want to try and implement having those connections made within a certain time frame? And if, if that's something you look into, do you, look at any grant monies? I don't know of any, but you could also maybe look at some sort of loan program where the town, it has a loan program for those, those people to be able to do that connection.
Let me just, and you're talking about as a loan program. In our case, it's, of course, a sewer enterprise. So could the enterprise create loan programs?
I'm not very well
That's really
versed.
the question that
Yeah.
we'll need to figure out.
I think you can work with legal counsel on how to structure that, yeah.
Or do we even want to? What's the difference?
Well, I mean, if you're going
Yeah.
to do it,
Yeah,
how do you do it, and how do you make it less of an impact on those who, frankly, have not signed up because of their own personal financial constraints? They would if
absolutely.
they had the money, but,
Yep.
okay.
Yeah. And again, these are just items that, I'm presenting as things to consider, that the town can think through, yeah. So that's what I have. We have a lot of resources on our website. So if you want to learn more if anyone wants to learn more about the treatment plant, we have a more detailed, schematic of our process, things like that. Feel free to go on our website. And my contact information is there as well.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you and your colleagues who are sitting quietly in the background, but we're probably going to call them into service. There you go. Oh, okay. You let the heavy lifting be done by the women. Okay.
They're the most qualified.
There you go.
We're the elected or the appointed, they're the professionals, they're the day-to-day operation.
So I'm not going to restrict questions, and we do have in our audience concerned ratepayers, as well as at least one representative of developers and our town engineer. So we are trying to fulfill an obligation of economic development, and here we sit at sewer capacity plus 3%. So first thing I would like to ask is, what is the penalty if one goes over? The understanding is that one of the other member towns is well over their capacity, and I don't know whether or not you can comment on that, truth, fact versus fiction,
yeah.
and then secondarily, is there in fact a penalty if we knowingly say, you know what, on paper it looks like it's bad, but we feel like there's a delta there, and we're going to push to that?
Yeah, so speaking to the other community, all the communities are discharging within their permit limits as of this time. We look at that 3-year average, so nobody is over their capacity on that.
And what would happen if we went over our capacity, again, being on paper?
Yep. So we would definitely work with the town to look at, why is this happening? Has there been a lot of, rainfall? What happened in those years? Is this just a trend because there's a lot of development and we're, well, why is this happening?
Can I just ask a clarifying question? I want to make sure, because I think I heard what you said. The violation is going over the actual flow to the system. It's not permitting an excess of the flow. That's not a violation. What's a violation is exceeding the flow to the plant. Is that correct?
That is my understanding, yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
That's the way I would
Yep.
understand it.
So, I mean, theoretically, if a town permits 120% of its limit and sends you 84% of its flow, it's fine.
Yeah.
You don't love it because what's looming there is additional flow.
Yes, and, we have, as the district, we need to make sure that we don't get to a point where we're hydraulically overloaded and we're taking too much flow and having any permit
Well, I understand.
violations
Yeah.
due to that.
Because
So,
you have a permit.
yes, so we have a permit with DEP and
Yeah.
EPA, yeah.
Yeah.
And there are specific requirements that we have to start reporting extra when we reach certain milestones of, 80% of our flow going, of our permitted flow is being discharged, then we need to start looking at, where we are with our flows
But
and our
at this point in time,
projections.
not counting the development, Town of Millis is well within its limitation.
That is correct, yep, absolutely.
And our view is at some level also that not only are we paying for the used, but unused
In your,
capacity. So current ratepayers are paying, not double, but, I mean, they're getting penalized for having that capacity sit there.
yeah, on the capital portion, the town of Millis will pay for the 11%, which is the percent that equates to the .628
Yep.
million gallons per day.
But if we were to work with you and say, okay, we know one of our developers is going to bring capacity online over a period of 5 years or 7 years or something. So we've got permitted that takes us over, but actual isn't even going to come up to approach that for a number of years. And we will do more in infiltration and inflow, I&I, and we will work with trying to get some of those who have not connected to connect. Is that the kind of thing that you're willing to work with us on?
I would,
We would be more than willing to work with you on something like that.
And you're Doug, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
My only fear is that if any given town overextends their allowance, per se, and now you have these commitments that your ZBA has approved, your Board of Health has approved, your planning boards have approved, your town engineer may have reviewed plans, and they sit in abeyance for a number of years. That's a commitment that the town made to that developer. So regardless whether it's 5 years or 15 years, that commitment is still out there. Now, if you get into a situation, which has happened, and unfortunately, every town in this area, the 495 outer belt, as I call it, every town is going through the same situation. They're up against their limits. They're developing, they're building, but my problem is if, and I don't want to open up Pandora's box here, but if the town of Millis gets an unfriendly 40B that comes into town, and you people are then committed to allowing that to happen, that flow is going to negatively impact what your flow limit as it stands now. And it will also, down the road, for many years, negatively impact those commitments you have on the board.
That is not an
So that-
academic issue for us. It's a real issue.
That's a real
Just
issue.
so you know that.
Today.
No, I don't know
Today,
that.
we're telling you,
Oh,
there's a risk
okay.
that we know of. Not a speculative one, but a risk.
So,
So we're nervous about that, too.
right, we have a number of concerns. We want to work with you, but we're trying to work out how we continue to move forward as a community with some obligations, some unanticipated, that we're going to have to deal with.
First and foremost, I'll extend an invitation. I mean, we meet, unless there's a scheduling glitch, we meet the second Thursday of every month. I don't know if the board wants to assign a liaison to the Charles River Pollution Control District, but it sounds like
Is there
at this
food?
point in time, it may be prudent. to
Food
do
and
that.
drink?
Actually, I would like
Food
to
and
ask, I would actually like,
Coffee and pastry.
you know, you've actually, thank you for setting me up. I would like to know what it would take for Millis to actually have a seat on the board. It seems to me we're a contributing member, and you're looking for us to have a regular participation in really important business and strategy conversations and technical conversations. And I would like to think that, you know, we've been customers for a long period of time, as evidenced by Liz's presentation, and I would hope that we would actually be welcomed with a representative seat on the board.
I can't sit here and speak on behalf of the board.
I understand
I've
that.
been on the board. This has been approached before. I know Charlie Aspinwall, I've been on the board, I've been a commissioner since 2000. I'm kind of like Jim, you know, I don't know how to say no to the town. And,
You worked on the regionalization
yes, we did, 30 years ago.
schedule,
Jim.
yep, school regionalization. I said, I know.
You guys
this-
look the
I
same.
know this guy.
You look the
He
same.
didn't have a beard and I didn't have a beard.
That'd be it.
You're unchanged by
Mayor
time.
had
I definitely had one.
black hair. But, yeah, lost my train of thought. Charlie has asked over the number of years, and whether it's been a formal request or whether it's just been in passing, hey, how about it? There's been a reluctance,
Why?
because we're the owners of the property, or the processing plant. You people are the customers. You know, we have other communities that come in and they drop their septage. You know, we just can't open the door for one and not the others. It just isn't fair that way. Again, if you want to put a formal request in, you know, we can, you know, we'll have counsel look at it just to make sure that we're not violating any bylaws or anything that it predates the four people sitting here. And, you know, we could review it at a meeting and take a vote, discuss it, whatever, and get back to you on that.
Who are the other communities that are seated on the board right now?
Just Medway and Franklin,
Just Medway and Franklin.
the two owners,
Right.
the two original owners of the plant.
Right.
Madam Chair?
Yes,
But
sir.
we do have about seven great communities that come in and leave septage. All of us come in, not the communities.
Perhaps we
Sir.
start with a representative who can go at least to represent our town and have discussions with them and understand what some options are.
And then they figure out how valuable they are, and then they come running and asking us to be on the board? Is that what you're
Whatever,
suggesting?
but at least it's the start of a dialogue that I think might be productive, and I just offer that as an opinion.
So a liaison is something that is a is that the pro forma structure for communities that are not on the board per se? Is that they have an assigned liaison to your,
And Franklin's the only one that chooses to send anybody, but,
okay,
and because of child rearing right now, that person is kind of stepped aside for a short period of time. But,
Okay.
Franklin's the only one that had anybody.
so can you communicate the information on the where and when and all that through to our town administrator?
Absolutely.
What are the questions we have not asked you that are burning in the decision halls of the other communities with respect to sewer treatment and where we are headed as a state? Is there anything that we have not asked you that we should have? Some omission of questioning, concerns? We do have, I'm looking at Mr. American in the back, we do have a developer represented by an engineer. I know he has strong opinions about formulas, reality versus what's on paper, and I'm hoping that he might come forward so that he understands that it's not, you know, it's not us making the rules, we're looking at the rules makers, unless you're satisfied with the content of their presentation. I am looking at you, I'm giving you a wink, too.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, I think my view is I just want,
This is Dan Merrickin, by the way. He represents many developers who come to town. Feel free to grab the microphone because the cable folks will be telling us that they can't hear you. Thank you, sir.
thank you. I just want to see what you guys are reflecting in your conversation, which is that this is more of a realistic conversation than a theoretical conversation. You know, as I mentioned, we have 260,000 gallons per day on the books, and we all know that's not a real number, and that's not going to bring us over the threshold. So the things you guys are talking about makes a lot of sense to me. I just don't want to see us overreact to kind of an odd situation where we have a lot of theoretical capacity on the books that's never going to materialize.
Excuse me.
Yes.
I think, Madam Chair, that we're seeing a dialogue begin to open at this point that offers options. And I think that's the critical factor that I've seen in the presentation and the discussion even thus far today, which is there's a recognition of the difference between actual and permitted flow. And everybody seems to understand that, and they get it. We all have to be sensitive to that, but I'm also understanding, hopefully I'm correct, that there's latitude there that gives us the option of moving forward that we didn't think we had prior to this conversation this evening without difficulty in working with this organization. And I think what I'm seeing tonight is, unless I'm interpreting incorrectly, there are some ways we can work with them given the circumstances we're in. And I think that's where we want to go at this stage.
Yeah, I agree, and I think Mr. McCaffrey kind of coined it the best when he acknowledged that, the real threshold is that the town of Millis can't discharge more than they're allowed to discharge.
Well, that's the actual that we're talking about. We all understand that. They're also, as I understand it, planning for some, what I'll call semi-worst-case conditions when they have an enormous rainfall or something like that, which there are going to be conditions where there's no way you're going to control it. I mean, we know that, you know that. But the question is, can we move forward where we're at? And it looks like we'll be able to do so. And that was my major concern. As you know, I brought that up on each of the occasions we've talked. And I'm gratified to hear that I think we can work with that, because they are willing to accept if we take certain actions, the permitted is a guideline, but it's not a stopgate.
Yeah, as long as a community, we make good decisions,
That's correct.
which I think that's what you're doing right now.
That's what we want to do.
We're trying to inform them. I have a question. Do you have from other communities some sort of a gallon-plus formula that kind of solves what is unknown for us, which is, on paper, our capacity is limited to 628 million gallons per day, correct? Is that right? And in reality, we're doing something else. We have this gray area of onboarding of development. So is there a gallon plus, some sort of a multiplier that you have perhaps provided to other communities so that it isn't as much guesswork as it seems like it might be, in terms of how do we not have an arbitrary situation where we say to, let's say, 5 subdivisions, I'm just tossing that out there, or a hotel or something, and we, as a board, as the Water and Sewer Commissioners, accept permitting for X gallons per day, and then we say to developer or opportunity number 6, sorry, we're going to stop the presses. I mean, we're trying to establish some policy that we can really put a stake in the ground with. So I'm just wondering if there is such guidance that, so we don't have so much of a, we're going to permit it and then see.
Yeah, we have the same sort of setup with the other 3 communities as well, where they use the Title V standard with the 110 gallons per day per bedroom, or, with a hotel, looking at those, those numbers too. That's in the Title V standard as well. So we are looking at that with all 4 communities.
So when you say looking at that, you're developing that type of a multiplier formula?
Same formula that the town of Millis has. Yeah, some of the towns, we're just trying to get more of a grasp on. Like, Millis has actually been planning extremely well with their flows, and it's all laid out, and so we're just trying to get the same way with all 4 towns.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, sorry.
Dave Fumato,
Hi, Dave.
Franklin, member, Vice Chair of
Thank you
Charles
for
River.
coming. Sorry, we didn't know you were coming. You would have
No,
had a
that's
name
fine.
tag.
I wasn't, it was one of those.
We're glad you're here.
Last minutes. My background's actually in engineering on the wastewater side, so I do have some relevant experience in this area that probably goes beyond. So I think that, to your point, the answer is a little more nuanced than I think everyone is really considering at this time. And I would caution that the backstop on all this is the DEP and EPA and the permitting that they do as they oversee the district. And as a district, there is no option to violate the discharge permit. There is a flow limit on the permit. As a matter of fact, in 2019, because of the high rain events at the end of 2018, and quite frankly, that a lot of member communities aren't doing enough to address, stormwater infiltration inflow, the district was in violation of their permit. DEP was notified. They were not happy. They let us know that, listen, we understand kind of the background, but as a district, you need to get your house in order. So the district right now is putting a lot of money into investigating our pipelines that we own to really understand if we're contributing to that and what we can do to mitigate that, because every gallon that's coming in our pipes that's clean water is a gallon that's one less gallon that's available to member communities. That being said, I think what's important to understand is that part of the backstop to this is the state has a caveat in every permit that says when you reach 80% of your permitted flow, in actual flow for 3 consecutive months, you need to start considering what you're going to do to upgrade your facility. Because it's not just about the actual flow coming down the pipe. That 110 gallons per day per bedroom is an actual number that's based on something. It's a maximum day flow that you anticipate to get from a bedroom. The average day is going to be less than that. The peak day and the peak hour are going to be much greater than that. The district, as a treatment facility, has to manage all of those flows. It's not an option. So that max day is actually an important number for us to understand and really use as a planning tool. If you start ignoring that and saying, well, our actual average is 50 or 60% of that, so we actually have a ton of capacity, you do, but if you permit all the way up to your actual capacity, and then that max day starts happening, you're going to be well over it, which means the district's going to start violating their permit. It's a snowball effect. And those are the type of things as board members and as, the staff that, you wrestle with. Where's the line in terms of practical versus being overly conservative? There's probably some area, give and take on both ends. I know in Franklin, we're struggling with that as the biggest user. Quite frankly, there's a lot at stake, and Franklin, as you well know, is undergoing growth just like everybody else. And that push and pull happens, but at the same time, it's really important to understand that it could potentially cost everybody a lot of money if the state steps in and says, well, not only are we going to limit what you're connecting, we're also going to start mandating changes to your system to allow, because once the flow is given and it starts coming, you can't undo that. So that's really kind of an important message to really understand, and then also to convey within town that, there are mechanisms, I think, whether it's removal, that type of stuff, where, everyone can work to realize more capacity within the constructs we already have, but to just start playing with numbers on paper can get us into some bad places. So
We're not trying to get you arrested, but I think, but for the greater community, and Kristen, you've been really quiet, and you have a title district engineer, so I'm curious as to what you would say to the community who still don't understand, even though we feel like we undertook a very broad educational approach, there are not, a stormwater utility is not the mainstream solution to stormwater compliance. And I'm just wondering what you would say to the community about what Millis did and, how it is positioned us well for all the avalanche of environmental compliance, because certainly people say to me, well, they don't have it in this town, they don't have it in this town, why do we have it here? We're paying more money. And I'm just hoping that you can kind of explain from a different perspective than ours the benefit of the utility. Anybody can jump in.
Are you actually talking about stormwater, surface runoff? Okay, the only way that would significantly impact us is if your manhole covers, your gaskets are blown, and it's going directly into a sewer main.
Got it. Okay, good.
You know, as far as the surface runoff.
Yep.
It really doesn't impact us because
Okay.
we're only dealing with septage and sewerage.
Got it. Okay.
You know, we're not dealing with gray water.
Okay.
Or clean water.
All right.
But again,
We're trying to do the right thing in town.
Yeah, no,
Across all the,
absolutely. And I know there are other towns out there that are talking about implementing, some kind of means to start capturing money, to whether they're going to set up an enterprise account or not, I don't know.
Right.
But for that very same purpose, is
Right.
at some point in time, either FedGov is going to wake up, EPA is going to either go away, wake up and say, we've mandated too much, or they're going to come down and say, how come you haven't done anything to date? And a lot of towns, all they have done is they've hired firms, done studies, and filed it away. You people have taken that next step, and you've actually implemented a program. Now, I understand that because I'm in a next door neighbor here. And I've dealt with that in other roles in my community. Like Jim, I don't know enough to say no. So I was on one of those committees that chose to file it for now. But again, it's just, where do you go? I mean, do you go to your local state representatives? Do you go to your, EPA? To me, my involvement with MMA, it was still my most rewarding experience in any role or board that I served on. Because it was a great place, a great source for information, and a great place to network. And I mean, to me, we have to do this 351. We can't do it Medway, Millis, and Franklin. So I mean, there's got to be a movement out there somewhere that not necessarily to push back, but just make sense of all these mandates that are being dumped upon us. And I that doesn't really deal with what we're here for tonight. I see what you're saying, because you've got clean water coming in, you've got surface runoff that comes from roofs and whatnot, and parking lots, and, well, I have a 5-car driveway, why am I gonna pay more than the guy that's just got a straight, a foot, a small single.
Have you been getting our mail? Have you been getting our mail, Doug?
No, I'm not reading your mail, but I've dealt with that. I've dealt with those whys and wherefores. So we really, all we can do is sit here and say we feel your pain, but unfortunately, it doesn't really impact our operation.
and you don't have plans to increase capacity in the district right now. Is that accurate? You just said you worked on equipment, but are you planning an expansion of capacity that then would feed to the communities, or no?
No, not at this time. He reminded me, I wanted to go back to, Jermaine?
Yeah.
Yeah, your earlier question about when Millis bought capacity, I wasn't sure if you fully understood the timing of that. The expansion was in 1998, and Millis bought additional capacity in 2011. So it was well after the fact that the plant expanded. Our most recent modification was nothing more than a process update.
Right, that
So
was
we
clear.
did not increase capacity. We became more efficient at running our product.
That did answer my question earlier when you mentioned
Okay.
it was just an updating of your system. However, it does lead into something you said, which has to do with your strategic plan and where you're going in the future. Obviously, this can't be a static operation. As you point out, Franklin's growing, we're growing, all of these communities, if they're doing the right thing, are going to continue to grow. And so, obviously, your plant, physical plant, you have to be considering that. What types of planning have you been doing strategically and otherwise?
Essentially, EPA and DEP are not looking to expand surface water discharges, so I don't foresee any additional flow being put into the Charles River from this plant. It's just not something that's an option. To be quite honest, the state is moving towards a groundwater model. So if you're looking to put capacity in additional sewage capacity, it's got to be a groundwater discharge.
Yeah, they don't want to move water that's in the local reservoirs and then just send it to Charles River where it ends up in the ocean. So the whole point is to try to keep water here.
So looking to recharge aquifers as they're being drawn from wells within Millis, being recharged back into the aquifer in Millis as opposed to being sent to Boston Harbor.
Yeah,
So,
but it's got to be clean when it goes back. And that's, right,
We'll agree.
that's, somebody's got to clean it.
Right, some process has to be put in
Yes,
place.
right.
And that's why I'm getting at it. It's whether you do it, or you do it in conjunction with us, or we do it alone, there has to be some basic planning in place where you're coming out and saying, okay, we can no longer proceed, even as we did in the recent past. There are new guidelines coming down the road,
Right.
and here's what's happening. But that's all part of what we should all be looking at in the planning process. So that's why I asked that question.
Can I just clarify particular fact? When does the permit expire? When does it, let's put it differently. When do you have to renew your permit?
We just submitted the renewal application this past, actually about a year ago. So we are.
About 5 years from now, you'll get it, based upon our experience.
Yeah, so we are waiting, yeah.
Okay, but
exactly.
so, all right, so we're in
So
the
we
renew-
are up for
And they are
renewal.
typically 10 years, 3 years,
They're a 5-year permit.
5-year permits, so
Yeah.
it's similar to what we would have. Could you just go back quickly to the slide which says these are the things you should try? Things to consider. I guess we would be, and not necessarily tonight, but if you have some specifics, you could sort of, specific examples of success. I'm not as concerned with II, not that we're heroes here, but I think we're doing a really good job with that, and we could always learn from somebody else. But I think we're also interested in, what you're experiencing from the, let's get the users who are holding the capacity, to either sign up or sign off. Because that is a big issue here, because we got a lot of those folks who are living along a sewer line who are not, and have no intention of hooking up. And that's fine, they're not paying for it, they've paid for the betterment, but they're also holding back their neighbor, really, who would like to hook up and can't. So anything you can say to us that would give us a little bit more context there, some things
Should I add
you've
something to
learned?
what
I-
you're saying?
I'm, go ahead.
I want to add just a quick note on that, and that is, what specifics have other towns done in terms of, are they forcing them to hook up? Are they adjusting it with penalties and saying, if you don't hook up, here's what's going to happen? What other things are other towns doing?
We haven't seen any other towns do this, so this would be something new, but it's an idea to consider. It's just a thought that, has come up in some discussions, but there's nothing, I haven't seen it implemented.
The II, isn't Tom Bellingham doing that?
Yeah, but this is for the betterment.
Oh.
Yeah.
No, but I mean,
No, but-
when you're talking
Well,
about II fee.
He's talking about anything on this.
Oh, anything.
Creative ways of asking developers to help out.
Yeah. Yeah,
You
so
hear
with-
that in the back row?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
so, like I said, the I&I fee that was done, Town of Franklin has
Okay.
that. So I would absolutely, reach out to them.
Yep.
They have implemented that. It's been in the works for, I think, a number of years now.
And is there anything that you're asking these, or that we had asked folks to do on site? And I'm talking about, for, more modern technology just for the bathroom, for, because I thought we were working as a country toward getting more sophisticated in the way we use water, period.
I don't know if you're through with the train of thought there, Jim.
Yeah,
I know Medway's very successful with educating people on the mass save
yeah,
for the low-flow toilets.
yep.
I mean, that was a huge success in Medway, and it's still ongoing. That funding is still out there from Mass Save
Okay.
to convert over to low-flow toilets. Some of this, I wholeheartedly support, but again, I mentioned MMA only because you might want to talk to some of the towns. Do they have things for, when a project is approved, specify a time frame? Is there anybody out there that's doing that now? I would certainly think that you could do that, but you would have to talk with council.
Right.
You'd have to go to your planning board rules and regulations. You might even have to go to your town bylaw. But I'm sure there are ways that you could implement this.
Right.
But again, you've got to take the appropriate steps to get there. And I think the same thing happens with the II. I mean, one of my biggest complaints, to be perfectly honest with you, is when you get a building inspector, walk into a house before, to sign off on an occupancy permit, and he looks over in the corner of the basement and he sees the sump pump there. Well, he should have the right to question that and say, well, where is that going?
Right.
Is that going into sewerage? Then they've got to fill that. They've got to retire that, fill it. It's not on the plan. It's not on the original plan.
Right.
And don't tell me it's a what if, because what ifs are forever.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do internally, as well as as long as you do it by the law.
Right.
Are there any other questions from the community who are seated before us? The room is pretty full, so, and we also have our town engineer, so he's being quiet and absorbing. I don't think this is new information to you, but I don't know if Mr. Carter wants to say anything.
I'll say one thing.
Okay. Grab a microphone, sir. Thank you.
What's your name again? I'm going to mention you, Dave. I think probably the biggest thing I heard tonight is what Dave here said. Are you going to expand the treatment plant, more flow? The answer is no. The DEP's headed down the road of groundwater discharge. And I mentioned at previous meetings a while back that you guys had hired us to look at possible areas to do groundwater discharge permits. And at the time, you had enough flow capacity, so it made more sense, no, let's not go down that road. There's not a lot of viable areas. They're very difficult, but that's kind of where the trend is going in this country right now, I think it's fair to say. So it may be, let's work on getting as many gallons out of this as you can, but if you want to allow growth, you may have to look at that as an option. For example, the golf course Toll Brothers, they had a groundwater discharge permit. That's the route that the direction that the DEP wants us to go in. We're recharging into the groundwater. So I just kind of wanted to mention that. Totally agree with what he said, and that might be the avenue you might have to consider in the future.
May I ask a question, though? We have a lot of swampland in this town. And our water table is not exactly a low water table.
Right.
So how do you deal with that groundwater discharge under those conditions?
It's not easy, and that's why you have to find the right area with the right soils. And there's some that were identified that we said, no, we can't go there because there's restrictions on the land.
Right.
It's town of Millis land, but there's conservation or that type of restrictions on it. It's not easy. I mean, basically, if you really think about it, they're driving you down the direction where you want to put a septic system in on each lot. That's basically a groundwater that you're discharging into the groundwater.
Right.
It's a very small, simplified way. And I understand the soils, it's not easy. That's the real challenge.
And if you set up an argument that says, okay, let the developer put in a groundwater discharge system, is that something that's even viable for these developments that are going in?
It is. It depends. I mean, if you look at, I'll use the word Toll Brothers here, because they were going down that road. They had a design treatment plant. They were all set to go. And then the flow became available. And it's the problem with what they were doing is it becomes very costly. It's an annual cost.
Right.
It's not cheap. Connecting to your sewer is an annual cost, but it's a lot cheaper.
On the other hand, if you don't have any capacity left to connect,
Then-
what's your cost?
Yeah.
So,
So that's all I wanted to just mention. That is kind of a route that we may have to consider more seriously.
Well, I guess the one nuance to that is if someone's coming to us with a, no, it wouldn't be just to us, but with a proposal for a development, because they're looking to us for street opening and they're looking for sewer and water and whatnot. Should we then be saying to those developers, you got to have a Plan B? Plan B being, groundwater discharge, because we need to know that. And if you think that, I mean, at one level, that's where we are today. To say,
On
all right,
paper, yeah.
on paper, we have no capacity. If you want to develop this parcel with 40 homes or whatever, where are you going to install your groundwater discharge plant or program? Where's it going to go? And if you can't find a place for it, then you can't build there.
Right, or they may look at septic systems and instead of 40 lots,
Yeah.
they got 20 lots. I mean,
Right,
that's.
exactly.
That's,
There's-
but those are the trade-offs that
Yeah.
have to be examined.
I mean, the irony here is after 30 or 40 years of pushing to sewer, we're going to go back to septic? I leave that question to people, never mind. I mean, it's, because we, I think you've heard, and you've all heard, and the community has heard, we're looking for ways that continue to support reasonable, rational growth in our town. Because we're so reliant on property taxes to fund the essential programs. And so we've had some success. I mean, we're the victims of our own success at some level because of the number of projects that are underway. But now we got to get ourselves ready for the next phase.
And the 40B scenario that you described, Doug, is real for us.
I
And
wasn't
we
aware of that.
don't want to be in a situation where we have developers who've followed the process, who've been permitted, who've gone through all of the presentations and satisfied the requirements, and then all of a sudden, somebody jumps the line.
But not to keep beating the same horse, but the developers, I mean, they come to you in 2002, and they say, we want to put in 93 homes. Well, here it is, 2020, and they haven't put shovel to earth yet, but now they're cutting back, and they're saying, well, we're only going to put probably about 50. Well, what happens to the commitment that you people haven't, you've committed that flow? So, I mean, there's got to be a quid pro quo here. There's got to be some kind of an open dialogue between your developers and your water sewer people, or your planning board, or your town engineer, But I would be remiss if I didn't tell you, and some of you may be aware, the Board of Selectmen in Medway, probably 2 years or less ago, passed a moratorium on sewer mains. So in other words, if there was to be any development, there had to be a main there already. They would not allow people to extend the sewer main to pick up 3 blocks away. So that has really, if nothing else, it's increased probably density and development, but it's curtailed a lot of that other out of control, runaway development. So, I mean, there are things that can be done, but it's just, and again, keep deferring to you, it's got to be done legally.
Yeah, right.
Well, are there any other questions or comments from my colleague? Any from the community who are here? Our town administrator, is there anything you want to say? So I want to, on behalf of the town and behalf of our board, as Water Sewer Commissioners, thank all of you. There's a lot of top brass seated at this table, and we greatly appreciate your time. We hope that you hear from us the earnestness of our town to be partners in good faith, to walk the line, to be artful but legal, and also to participate in, the Charles River Pollution Control District as in whatever capacity we can from a business perspective. And in that respect, I think we will follow up formally with whatever letter you're looking for to seek the ability to sit at the table, liaison and/or, headed in the direction of a more permanent seat of, on the management committee. And I don't know whether or not our... It's too late now. Go ahead. I'm all set. What? It's too late now? You didn't raise your hand. Would you like to speak? No. I'm going to hear about this later. Why don't you just step forward? You know how this is. Our town DPW, Mr. James McKay, who has done Herculean work.
That's all right. We don't have to
in this
go for
area.
that. Madam Chair, most of this on this list has already been discussed between myself and Liz. That's why it's up there. Millis does not have a problem with developers coming in. They come in, they build their homes, they connect to sewer. We're not waiting for it's the people that have tied in back in the 90s, 2000s that haven't tied in. When you talk about II is a very expensive thing, and when you only have 2,000 people, maybe I think it's 2,400 customers that are paying in, we've already spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in a 10-year plan. When Mr. Carter has come up with a new plan that I asked him to come up with, and it's over $1 million+ for the next 10 years. So where do you get to a point where you stop asking 2,400 people to foot that bill? Their rates are, no matter how many people we tie in, it's not going to absorb that amount of money. So the board has to make a decision, as I stated 3 months ago. What's on paper is exactly what these people here came tonight, what I asked them to come and discuss. It's your choice to allow that to go up to that 80%. Because we have regulations that we're following. The DPW are following the regulations. When we get to a certain point, she showed the slide, it was 103%. I think we're at 103%. That's not my decision, that's your decision of what you're going to do with that. And it's a tough decision. And you can't keep on saying, aye, stuff like that, because the ratepayers, they can't afford it. The prices of, in the news that I sent you this past weekend, that's more, I would pay more attention to the water aspect, because our rates generate from our sewer collection. You know, they pay through the water, what goes through the system, and if we lose our water permit, you know, we're going to lose a lot of revenue in the sewer system. That's going to almost, so the rates are going to have to go up to pay for all that. But we'll talk about, I think we're going to talk about that on the 2nd.
And that references the Water Management Act.
Correct.
For people.
Which
who
our
don't-
permit is going to be finally renewed after 10 years.
So you are certainly a part of the whole conversation. So while the board is the Water and Sewer Commissioners, as the head of the DPW, who's really been driving all of our readiness, positioning us with equipment and knowledge, certifications and such, we're definitely going to be looking to you for, and all of the attachments that you have, whether it's to the Charles River Pollution Control District experts seated here, our town engineer, to participate in policy development.
I think we have, you know, some discussion. We met with town council and the board last week. We've come up, those were the ideas that we came up with. That's on there. I know Mr. Jermaine sent something to the town administrator. I haven't reviewed it yet. I just briefly read some of it. I think it's probably one of the most worthwhile proposals for people that have held on to these sewer connections for quite a while. But that's decisions that, you know, a proposal, if you're asking us to come up with you know, myself, the engineer, to propose to the board, that's...
Well, I think part of what you're saying is we can continue to do II in a reasonable way, but if you want a 110 for 110 pickup, it's going to be by finding something to do with those who have not utilized the opportunity.
Absolutely.
We get 100% of the 110 gallons if one of the persons along the road, let's just say, one way or another, waives their right to sign up. Now that is freed up as capacity.
I mean, we have over, what, 40 to 60,000 gallons of unused sewer that are sitting, that people have had that stub in front of their house for 20, 30 years.
Right.
And that's what I think we have to go after. And town council has a proposal for that.
Well, it is the most, we get the biggest bang for the buck out of it.
If we can get that, correct.
Well, but it's also something that has a consequence on the residents. So it's, you know, it's not just a slam dunk.
Right.
And that, in my way of thinking, and I could be wrong, and I don't want to jump to conclusions because council, I believe, is coming next time, we have to change the bylaw, which means the town meeting has to approve it.
So the notice to the town with the experts seated before us is this is a dynamic but mandatory conversation for our town to be having. That's why it's being done under the spotlight. We so appreciate your time, personal time at night, to come and share your knowledge, expertise, and encouragement with us. We look forward to working with you. You'll be hearing more from us. Please don't be strangers. Please advise at will, because we're going to need it. And I don't know if there are any other questions you have of us.
I don't.
We don't have any parting gifts beyond our appreciation.
You don't want our parting gifts.
But Dave, next time you come, we'll make sure to have a, yeah, thank you very, very much for coming, everybody. We really appreciate it. And can you leave your slide deck with us, or do we have it? I don't know if you
I
do.
can email it.
That'd be great.
Actually,
Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, perfect. Thank you. Excellent.
Keep meeting like this, okay? I believe it, yeah.
And you know what happened to us?
What do we-
$3.8 million.
Yeah,
The state pulled the plug out.
right out from under us.
Do you want me to take your picture together?
That's right. All the equalization money gone, right in the middle.
Yeah.
Yep.
Keep the teachers. We're not going to help you pay for it.
That's right.
Liz, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Kristen, thank you.
Here.
Right.
All right, the next item on our agenda, and I don't know, Mr. American, are you? I don't know. Mr. American, are you representing our next agenda item? That's a big yes. Okay, good. All right. We're going to get set for Agenda Item 039, which is the review and approval, however interesting, of the, in timing, a water and sewer main extension for 1344 Main Street. And Mr. Thomas Roach, a developer well-known to town, is being represented this evening by Mr. Dan Merrickin, his engineer, and I believe Mr. McKay is also available to speak on this. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Tom could not be here tonight. He had some surgery and is unavailable, unfortunately. So I just got notice on Friday that you guys were going to take this up, and
Aren't you glad?
It's been kind of on hold, I think, while you were flushing some of these things out. So I'm going to defer to you to tell me kind of where you sit. I'll just recap. This is being proposed as a LIP, a 20-unit LIP, to provide affordable housing at 1344 Main Street, and it would entail 22-bedroom units, which would be a max day flow of 4,400 gallons a day and an average day flow of 2,200 gallons a day. So we did submit the applications for a water and sewer extension, and that's just one of the many steps in the process if this project were to go forward. But it was, I think, the significant issue, the most significant issue when we met last to discuss the project.
I know that you have presented pictures of this, so, and I recognize that you got called in at the 11th hour, but those do exist on file. I think we've seen some schematics of.
Yes.
Can you kind of describe it for the people who may be viewing at home looking for those?
Sure. The project is kind of narrow at the street frontage and larger in the back, so the units would be in the back.
And it's opposite, just so everybody understands, it's opposite more or less Tractor Supply, up on a bank, kind of set back into a hill.
Correct.
So you're not going to see it right on Route
No,
109.
the units would be 200-300 feet off of the street at least.
And they're townhomes?
Townhomes, two-bedroom townhome units.
So all of them, none of them are one level, they're all two level. Are they all connected? Is it one building? I just don't remember.
It's multiple buildings. I think, if memory serves, I think it's units four per building, I think, so 5 buildings.
One of the things that has come up in the context of just developments in general, but 40Bs specifically, is the ratio of parking. So I'm just wondering if you could address visitor parking, unit parking, handicap parking.
Well, we had figured 2 per unit, which is pretty generous for a project of this nature. More typical for these types of projects is somewhere between 1.5 and 1.7 parking spaces per unit. You generally only provide handicap spaces for units that may or may not be accessible. There isn't a requirement necessarily to provide handicap parking in general. But so there actually be a good amount of parking on this project for the proposed number of units. It's not going to be tight for parking.
And the construction timeline is?
Well, that depends on whether the selectmen are interested in supporting the project. If they are, then the applicant would move forward with the LIP process, which involves, probably presenting some more detailed plans to you so that you can get a better feel for it, and then ultimately going to the state for consent, and then we would file an application with the Zoning Board of Appeals for a comprehensive permit.
So I know that our director of the DPW is frantically going for his laptop.
May I just
presentation for
ask
this.
a quick
Yes.
question, Madam Chair? Would the developer be willing to consider groundwater how to discharge for the development?
You could not do septic on this property.
You
There's-
cannot.
There's not enough room for a project like this on that project to do septic systems. There are some sites that have sufficient size and soils to do that. This would not be one of those sites.
That's a good and timely question coming off of our prior conversation, and we'll be asking that of everybody, Mr. American, coming forward, obviously, since you were here. Mr. McKay, can you just confirm for this board that this consumption was already part of the formula in terms of kind of a permit reservation?
Correct. So the application came in, I believe it was 3 months ago, 4 months ago, before the 114 Union Street, before it was filed with the zoning board, and I don't think they ever came to you, but and this came right after 949 Main Street. I was not aware that this was a 40B. This is the first I'm hearing of that. I thought it was just going to be a sale. The property already has a sewer stub that...
Because the last time we were there, they were here, they told us that.
Yep, okay.
So this is new development.
Yeah.
Told us what?
That it was not going to be a 40B.
No, it is.
Well, the last time the applicant was here.
Correct, that's what I
My
thought.
understanding was that it was not a 40B.
Yep.
And now you're telling me it's proceeding as a 40B project.
No, that's the only way it could go forward on this site is as well, the applicant's not proposing what is an unfriendly 40B,
No,
right?
I understand that.
They're proposing a LIP, which is a local initiative
I understand what that
petition.
is as well.
Yeah.
But if I'm not mistaken, and maybe I am, you left the board, at least this board member, with the understanding that this was not going to be affordable.
Oh, no, it is. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's fine.
Yeah, no, my apologies if that was the
Let's
impression.
just be clear, so.
So, just so you understand, the way those projects works is 25% of the units.
I understand how they work.
Okay, so just so that everybody else
Absolutely.
understands.
Yeah.
Yep, 25% of the units would be affordable.
Yeah.
That would be a requirement of the state to go forward as a LIP project or even a regular company.
So what you're looking for is the board to support this as a friendly 40B project?
Well, there's kind of two things.
Yeah.
What you're talking about now, I think, is a water and sewer connection for the project.
Yeah.
But there's also separately, for it to go forward as a LIP, that would need the board's consent.
Right.
Yeah, for it to be done as a LIP as opposed to an unfriendly. And the applicant's not really interested in doing an unfriendly
Well, we are
comprehensive
certainly
permit.
interested in working with applicants to realize friendly 40Bs.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be of great benefit to the town. Maybe my confusion was the ownership versus the rental,
Yeah, and I don't think that's settled yet.
because if it's rental, then all the units count.
Correct. If it's rental, you
And
get
that's where I
credit
can
on the
be
rolls for
correct.
100% of the units, even though only 25% are actually affordable.
Okay.
I don't think the applicant's made a firm decision on that one way or another, so I think
That
that's
may be
something
where
we
my
can discuss
confusion
further.
was.
And
I
mine.
have much confusion these days.
I just want to acknowledge that we do have a document from Legacy Engineering's CEO dated November 24th, 2019, and it does reference a 20-unit
Correcting me now.
You must have
LIP,
called me a
affordable housing, but it does not designate whether or not it's owned, not owned, what the ratio of contribution would be to affordable housing.
where my confusion-
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
And I
that-
don't, and I think that the question actually came up, and I don't think it was clarified, so I think
No.
everybody's right.
25% of the units will be affordable units. It's a question of whether it's rental or ownership.
Right.
And that affects your roles,
Right.
your
Right.
affordable housing stock rolls with the
Right.
state differently. That
The
decision
other friendly
affects that.
40B down the road is rental.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there would be 12 units there. I think there's 4 that are actually affordable. but
4 are
12
affordable, and you get credit for all 12.
For all 12.
Yeah.
Jim, I think
Thank
there's only 10.
It's actually only 10, I believe.
Yeah, it was 12, was 25, whatever it is now.
Correct, Jim McCaffrey now.
Soon to be 2.
Sorry.
So, Mr.
So
McKee, do you have
there-
anything to
No,
add
just
here?
to clarify, I mean, as the previous spokesperson spoke, there is a water main, a sewer main that goes in front of the property. They have a stub for the property that's already there. They'll have to increase it a little, for the size of the sewerage coming out. This could be one of those that I would ask that, for 20 units, this could be something, there's a proposal that I would ask that we put a metering station before it enters into our sewer system, so we can get 20 units is a good idea of what a flow, and I'm sure each unit's going to have 2 to 3 bedrooms, but that's a proposal I'll have to ask. 2 bedrooms each. So there's 40 bedrooms. So it is part of the calculations that Mr. Carter proposed, and it's also on the water master proposal that I submitted to the DCR a couple of weeks ago.
My colleagues have any questions? So we are being asked, I believe, for a vote to support a LIP.
No.
No, just the water and sewer extension.
Sorry.
Water and sewer.
Sorry,
Water and sewer.
jumping ahead. Do we have a motion in that respect?
Before I make a motion, and I do remember this coming up at the last time, and I am probably correct, but not necessarily as we've proven. I was interested in what the developer was willing to contribute toward the issue of this bigger issue that we have. And I'm not asking for specifics, but there was a list of things that included some potential for developers to participate in II, to participate in some other items, so that as we grant access to the sewer system, we might ask the developer at the outset to add some proposal as to how they would help us control these sewer flow.
I'm sure, yes. I just don't know what to extend in the way of an offer, because I don't know if you've kind of gelled any, formal proposals, what those would look like and what those requirements might be. And I mean, I don't think this applicant would be averse to any reasonable requirements.
Okay, well, that's what really what I'm getting at. Ultimately, when we approve the actual permit, I would like to see what it is and I understand, I'm asking you to speculate.
Right.
We have to determine what it is we would like to achieve.
Correct.
And what we would like the developers to participate in.
Yes.
And I'm trying to get at least a verbal commitment tonight that this developer is willing to work with us, as long as we can make a reasonable deal that's economically viable.
Yes.
To help us out with this
He
problem.
is, yes.
I definitely think that that's something that, I'm in total agreement with my colleague on that we need to now that we have this menu of needs, that we need to work on codifying it on our end, and then be more in a position to present to developers and say, we need your partnership. I mean, that was one of the recommendations that came from the town engineer when you were here for the predecessor meeting to tonight. I see that we do have a question from the floor, and a very recognizable face. Nice to see you,
Madam
former chair.
Kathy McGinnis, 78 Island Road. There was one unanswered question from the last meeting. I wonder if town council's had a chance to review the requirement whether residential can be used in an industrial zone?
Is this regarding a certain project, or?
I believe this is industrial property.
Oh,
industrially-
because it's a 40B, I believe so, but I'll reaffirm that with council, but I believe because it's a 40B.
Okay, could
But-
you just get a written opinion too? Would the board mind a written review for us to look at? And also, Mr. American just made a comment that this project could not be built as a regular subdivision, and I'm wondering why.
Well, it couldn't be built as a multifamily housing project in the district because this is an industrially zoned piece of land. So this is very typical for 40Bs. They're often on pieces of land that could not support that kind of a project. That's the whole point of the 40B laws, is to allow for greater flexibility. So this is industrial zone land. It's not zoned for residential uses, but as a comprehensive permit, it can be allowed.
I just want to make mention that there's never been a 40B in an industrial or commercial zone in Millis. And also, the project on Union Street is a commercial zone also. So it'd be a good idea to have the answer to that before anything's constructed or approved. Thank you.
And Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
as you had mentioned, town council will be here at your meeting next week, so I will let him know ahead of time so he can discuss that with the board at your meeting next week and
Yeah.
clarify any issues surrounding that.
And just so you know, I mean, I've permitted several comprehensive permits on commercial and industrial, so it's certainly within the realm of permissible activities.
How best to answer your question, though? What would you like to hear from the developer in terms of, we have to come up with a list of things that we need. Some of those are policy.
Well, at this point, what you're asking us for is to approve an agreement you can hook up to the sewer system.
Yeah, I'm asking, yes, which is I'm asking you to consent to the project to connect to water and sewer. I think you could do that conditionally, that
That's really what I'm.
the applicant would comply with any policies you may adopt in the intervening time between now and when the comprehensive permit is actually approved by the Zoning Board of Appeals with regards to sewer connections.
I mean, that's really where we're headed, I think.
And that's very reasonable.
Assuming we're willing to move forward with the applicant, I think it's going to be conditional, the applications will be conditional on reaching agreement on a reasonable contribution toward this sewer solution. I mean,
Right. And this is all kind of part of
Well, there's a negotiation.
Part of the
that's
LIP
happening.
process,
Right.
you know, like the Union Street project is not a LIP. They don't even have to come to you. You know, this is the applicant coming to you saying, I want a LIP, I want to do a LIP in cooperation with the community. So this is all just part of that conversation.
Are there any other questions or comments from the floor before I entertain a motion by one of my colleagues? I think you're in a good position to have that.
Well, Madam Chair, then I'd make the motion that the board approve the sewer main extension application for Rocha's Building Company at 1344 Main Street, subject to the developer's agreement to work with the town to provide mitigation solutions for sewer flow.
Second.
So moved, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carries unanimously. Please tell Mr. Roach that we hope he's on the mend.
We need to do the water.
He'd do the water.
Sorry.
No. I make a motion that the board approve the water main extension application for Rocha's Building Company for 1344 Main Street, subject to working with the town on any conditions that may apply to a reasonable contribution to the water system.
Second.
So moved, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, all opposed. Are there any other things that you would like while I'm enthusiastically making motions, Mr.
No,
American?
so we'll advance the conceptual plans a little bit more and come
Yeah.
back to you to discuss the actual LIP application, just so that we can talk about those other things and any other issues that may pop up unrelated to water and sewer.
I think what we'll do on our end, I'm sure Mr. McKay is already working on this, is we're also working on kind of developing what is that menu of mitigation
Yep.
remedies and how can we work with developers, so.
Great.
Thank you
Madam
very
Chair,
much.
I would
Yes,
like
sir.
to just say, in conclusion, and I think the board will agree with me, we are interested in making reasonable arrangements with developers to increase the affordable housing stock in Millis.
100% yes.
Woefully understocked.
Well, it's
this
also,
is-
it's also an advantage to the community, because
Absolutely.
once you have a housing production plan in place, if you approve a certain number of units every year, you go into safe harbor, and you can preclude the mega
Well,
40B
we have a plan.
coming in.
What we're not
do.
getting is the actual construction of the units, and now.
Well,
we have
that's the thing,
proposals.
so, you know, like Medfield does a lot of this, where they solicit local developers to do kind of small, comprehensive permit projects with the support of the community, and they have been in this perpetual state of safe harbor for years and years and
Right.
years, and they're going to, this year, reach their 10% threshold. It's a very effective strategy for meeting the state requirement.
Yeah.
We actually have several subdivisions, and what I've been told, because I've asked the question, I'm looking at Director McKay, is that, what I've been told is that those developers, in particular Toll Brothers, have done other things for the town with respect to capital infrastructure investment, and that's why they haven't had a ratio of any of those particular homes. And I believe Ridge Street and J. William Heights are similar, correct? That those developers are not they've not been asked by any town authority to make a percentage of those homes 40B. And maybe that's something we should be looking at. Is that what I'm hearing from you? Am I hearing that accurately or no?
Well, it's different. So what a lot of communities who are really proactive about this is, it's not a zoning where they impose requirements on all development necessarily. They go out and they solicit developers. They say, gee, we think that this property would be a nice, small, manageable, comprehensive permit project. Are you interested in pursuing a LIP? And they work with a lot of local developers because they have relationships with their local developers, and they've been very effective at working with their housing trust and local developers and the selectmen to identify a number of properties where they could put these kind of, non-mega comprehensive permit projects in place, and they've just been making these very steady gains towards their requirement. And like I say, this year, they're going to hit their 10%, and I think they're planning that when the census comes out at the end of the year, they're also going to cover that, and then they're going to be covered for the next 10 years. So it's a real good way to do it. If you sit around and wait and don't do anything with your affordable housing requirements, that's when the 200-unit and the 300-unit projects come knocking at your door, and there's really nothing you can do about it. The only thing you can do is try to put yourself in safe harbor, which is by almost soliciting and approving these smaller projects on a very kind of regular basis.
I think that's good advice.
Yes.
Thank
Thank
you,
you for your
sir.
time.
We appreciate your time.
Tom, please.
Yes, please. Our next order of business is, I'd like a motion to open a hearing. This is a water use abatement hearing that has been requested of the town by the resident and homeowner of 180 Orchard Street. This is a hearing that covers a period of time from fiscal year 16 through to fiscal year 19, or 4 years. So if I could have a motion to do that, that would be great.
Madam Chair,
Yes, ma'am, sir.
I move that the board open the hearing regarding an application for a water abatement from Mr. Zachary Lee.
Second.
So moved and seconded. Do I need to poll, or can we just say all in favor?
You can poll, you can do either.
I'll poll the board to be on record for opening the hearing. Mr. McCaffrey?
Yes.
Mr. Jermaine?
Yes.
Ms. Barnes, yes. So coming to the table are going to be presentations made by the town officials who oversee our water billing process, and then the resident who obviously has a specific request of the town. And we should say on the record, first of all, that I'm going to manage the hearing, so the town's going to speak first, you're going to speak second. We're not going to rebut each other. All comments, I'm going to ask them to come through the chair. For the record, for the public, this board has received an ample supply of information provided both by the resident as through the town, as well as town records, to include past correspondence and bills and such. So I'm going to open the floor. We have Jennifer Scannell, who is our town treasurer and collector of many years, and DPW Director Jim McKay. So I'm going to let you decide who's going to speak first to the board.
Jen can address her
I'll
memo.
start. So Jennifer Scannell, Treasurer Collector. Just to give you a little background on the situation, this past September, Mrs. Lee came into the office to inquire about hooking up to town sewer. Currently, his account is water only. At that time, the Assistant Treasurer was reviewing his account and said to Mrs. Lee that we had been estimating for 4 years. We've been sending quarterly letters saying that there was an issue with the meter, we need to get in. She acknowledged that they had been receiving the letters. We then went ahead to set up an appointment to get into 180 Orchard Street. So DPW went out a few days later and noticed that the wires were not connected to the meter, hence why we were not getting an outside read for several years. So what happens when we don't get an actual read, we have to estimate. We usually estimate based on the 4 previous quarters, so we've been estimated pretty conservatively over the last 16 quarters. So the DPW at that point got an actual read off the meter. They fixed the issue and came back and gave us the actual read. We went ahead and computed the bill from the last actual read to that day, and his bill, I think, was $2,355.88. So just to give you a quick overview of the way we do water sewer billing, it's a 3-tier system. The first 25,000 gallons is billed at $3.70 per gallon. The next 25 to 50,000 gallons is billed at $5.87 per gallon. And anything over 50,000 is in Tier 3, and that's $9.40. So in his situation, 218 gallons was billed at Tier 3. So he's not disputing the usage, he's disputing that it should be billed at Tier 1 level. His rationale, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, is if he takes his total gallons and divides it by the 16 quarters, he's under that 25,000 threshold limit. However, it's hard to say if it would be under or over in any given quarter over the last 16 quarters. Some quarters are going to be higher, especially if you have an irrigation system, if you have a garden that you're watering. And in fact, we just did a quarterly bill run from the last time we got an actual read to January 8th. And his actual read at this point was 58,000 gallons, which brings him in Tier 3. So he was billed at 25,000 gallons, 25,000 gallons at Tier 2, and 8,000 gallons at Tier 3. So frankly, I'm recommending that the selectmen do not approve the abatement. As you can see from the information I provided, we have sent several letters over the last 4 years from,
May 22nd, 2017.
Microphone.
Sorry, so the first letter that was sent out was May 22nd, 2017, and it just advised that we're getting an estimated read, and we asked, and the phone number was placed there to set an appointment up. And then there was one on May 22nd, 2017, March 22nd, 2018, April 23rd, 2018, and August 22, 2018. And they all state the same. Please, we've been trying to get in touch with you. Please get in touch with us. We're not getting an actual read.
Anything more from the town?
No, again, I agree with what Jennifer, just stated, that we don't know what, the usage would have been. And this is just a policy procedure that we've followed for every abatement hearing that we've ever heard. We try to have a step one hearing with Mr. Lee, and he chose not to. He just wanted to come to this step right here. He didn't want to have that hearing with myself, Jennifer, and we would have had Carol in with us, the way we've been doing with stormwater hearings, and we've been doing it with our water hearings.
Okay, great. Mr. Lee, you are the property owner of 180 Orchard Street.
Yes.
You have the floor to briefly enumerate your argument in favor of an abatement.
I'll be as brief as I can. I know everybody's going to go home. I'd just like to rebut what Mr. McKay just said right off the bat about the preliminary hearing before it got to the stage. I contacted Mrs. Scannell about this, and we actually tried to set a couple of dates that I was open to. We couldn't make one for, I don't exactly recall why, but the selectmen only met Monday, and then there was 2 weeks off, blah, 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 blah. By the time it got around to them computing the actual bill, which I received, they said, well, opportunity's over, you couldn't make that one. They called me the same day, actually, to see if I could come in, and in the middle of the day, I believe it was, I'm working. So I just want to correct that right off the bat. I did make the effort.
Okay.
After it had turned into a bill, I did go in on December 23rd to meet with Mrs. Scannell, Mr. McKay, and Mr. Gazinski. I stated my case to them. I know I had corresponded with you.
Yes.
And I stated my case to you as well. So everyone was pretty much aware. I didn't actually want it to get to the stage. I thought that the common sense math that I was providing would be enough to see it my way, frankly, and move forward. Again, I'm not disputing the usage necessarily, although I have no actual proof of it because I wasn't taking the actual reading off the meter. Never thought I would get to this stage. Should I go down the math again for anybody that hasn't heard it?
I don't
Would you
think,
like to hear it?
the only disadvantage of that, I mean, you're welcome to, but I feel like it's
had it,
hard.
and it just-
We have it, and I don't think it benefits an audience. I guess it's just really hard to kind of follow math. Do you know what I mean? I can assure you that we definitely have a ton of materials from you.
I mean, okay, if it's hard to follow math, I think it's actually pretty easy.
No,
math to follow.
don't misunderstand me. I'm saying to the audience here to just follow somebody talking about math if we had slides or something like that.
Fair.
So I'm just trying to say, I think we're pretty clear on the numbers.
This is what I have. I don't think anyone's going to get to read this too.
If you want to pass it to us, we can certainly pass it down. But I know that, you and I have had communication, and what I said to you is it's always your right to go for a hearing, and that's where we're at, so.
Yes, ma'am, and that's fine.
Okay.
So anyways, yeah, again, I've just never been offered an explanation about why I'm still being billed at the highest tier. I know you've said it's the policy in the past, but the math clearly puts me, the whole bill, as I've said, in the tier 1.
So.
I guess I'm not understanding a reason that it's being billed at tier 3.
Yep.
Because I understand what you said, you can't tell, but, if you were estimating my bill all along,
Okay,
it's not like I all of a sudden used.
So we've been estimating your bill all along, which has been in Tier 1. But again, it's hard to say what you would have used from quarter to quarter. If you have an irrigation system or a garden, or if you're watering, cleaning your cars during the summer, the bill's going to skyrocket during those months.
It
So
can't
you're not
skyrocket
going
that
to-
much, and I don't have an irrigation system. It's been off since the Toll
I'm
Brothers
not
project.
saying you do or don't,
Okay,
but
so
it's
let's
gonna
just
change
try and
the
go
bill.
through the chair, so I I appreciate it that this is a hot issue.
And to your point, the last actual read that we just got from the day that the DPW workers went in, which I believe was
I'll tell you
sometime in
exactly.
September, to the last actual read that we just completed in mid-January, your bill was 58,000 gallons, which would
Tier
prove
3.
that you're in Tier 3.
Yeah.
So it's not safe to assume that the last 16 quarters, you would have been under the 25,000 threshold.
So
May-
I have a question. Let me ask a couple of questions, sir.
Can I just address this point real quick? I'm really sorry, but it's,
But this is the end of the goodwill right here. Yep.
Oh, okay.
You can answer it.
sure, I do debate the initial reading. I wasn't there and had no knowledge even that they were coming. But what I will say is that I did take a picture of my meter the same day that I went in for the hearing with the three of them, and the rate at which I'm using water, based on the picture that I took today and the picture that I took then, is not even close to the reading that they claim to be the actual reading. I didn't know that they were coming. I never actually took the picture of the meter on that day.
So let me ask a couple of questions here.
Sure, absolutely.
And I'm sure my colleagues have questions. First of all, from a procedural standpoint, when a ratepayer gets their bill, they can't hang on to a bill and then average it out, right? Your bill is billed quarterly based on whatever your consumption is, and then it's another quarter and another quarter and another quarter. So first of all, there's no practice. I just want to establish that there's no practice that I'm aware of averaging out quarters, number one. Number two, and you and I have already conversed about this. What's troubling to me is that you are asking us to revisit, is it 16 or 17 quarters at this point?
actually
17 quarters. So that canvasses 4 fiscal years and is a town administrator ago. And in fact, our current DPW director was in fact not the DPW director then. So I'm a little concerned that what's being asked of our board is to go so far back into history that it's kind of unfair. I mean, we manage very publicly the budget process, and we keep it very real time. And there are very few carryovers that are approved at town meeting when bills trip a fiscal year. So I think, first of all, I think it's a difficult position. I can see your face, you don't agree. But it's a difficult proposition to be asking, I think, any organization, private sector or public, to go back 4 fiscal years, a COO ago and a director of DPW ago, to kind of look backward. We did see within the evidence that was provided to us as background, not only your correspondence indicating dispute, but also evidence of letters that were sent to your home, pictures of the meter that clearly wasn't operating as it should have, or at least I would say that as a layperson. But I guess what I want to know, I think what is perplexing to me is that you are, I believe, a master plumber by trade.
That's correct.
So would you have ever allowed a meter to be operating in that situation for a customer?
In most towns that I work in, Millis might be the exception. I work in Needham, Wellesley, Newton a lot. That we plumbers don't own the meter, the water department owns it. It's not our jurisdiction. Plumbing, technically, the definition of plumbing in the plumbing code begins after the water meter. Some towns, apparently it's a town-by-town thing, whether or not the plumbers are even allowed to work on the meters. I don't consider meters in my day, at all, period.
I'm going to defer to my colleagues.
Let me just ask the DPW director, who owns the meters in Millis?
The original meter the town owns,
Right.
and anything after that it breaks, or for any reason, the customer will pay for another meter, and the town does own it. We ask,
Who owns the meters?
the town owns the meter,
So
and
it's
if
no different in Millis than it is in other.
than any other town.
And we
the
have a meter in this property that wasn't registering for 4 years.
Correct.
And we contacted the homeowner multiple times by mail, asking them to let us go in there and take a look at the meter so we could fix it. No response.
Correct.
Not true.
Well, you have shown no evidence that you responded.
I did
So I
post-
have the evidence in front of me indicating that you were contacted.
I was contacted by mail, and I got several letters from Mr. McKay. I got them all right here, copies of all of
We
them.
have them too.
I'm sure you do. The first notice on May 20th, 2017, I don't recall receiving. I did receive his second notice. I did put in a call. I mean, I don't know how relevant this is to what you want to know, but I did respond to that. Talked to him on the phone. Explain my situation that I had. This is before the water bill thing. This is.
Let me just interrupt you for a second. Because what we were asking to do is go in and check to see if the meter was working. That's what we're asking, because that's what all the other water customers, the 2,000 other water customers get.
Okay.
And we're relying on the meter. And apparently, you were unwilling, or for whatever reason, to allow the town to come in and check that meter.
No, that's what I was in the middle of explaining. That's not accurate at all. I did contact Mr. McKay. The second notice I received a year later, so obviously I must have missed the first one, but I did get the second one a year later, which was March of 2018, okay? And right around, maybe a couple of days later, I did have a problem. There's a shut-off valve, a valve that you operate to turn the water on and off to your house so you can do work on your own house. It's before the meter, on the street side of the meter. The water comes in, goes to this valve, goes to a meter. Believe me, this is relevant. I couldn't shut it off. So I did call the DPW, and I said, hey, Mr. McKay, I need somebody to come out and shut off my water. Oh, by the way, you've been sending me notices. You guys probably have to do something to replace my meter. And do you recall that conversation?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I mean, if you called and asked that would send somebody off to shut your meter off, we would have dispatched somebody right away if you had a leak.
What was actually told to me was, I said, I received the notice, and I'm following up on this. I need you to come out and look at the shut-off valve. And what I was told was, do it when you can. You're a plumber. We can actually, because you told me that a plumber actually installs the meter. I said, I'm a plumber. Remember?
Go ahead, finish, and I'll respond.
Remember? And I said, I've also been getting these notices, something is up with my meter. You guys need to come out and check it. And you told me it doesn't really matter, because we can always do a manual read at the end, so when you feel like replacing this valve, call me then. That was it. And then I did follow up, that was back in March of 2018. It was May of 2019 when I actually got around to doing it. I actually had an emergency and had to do it. So I had a DPW worker in my house a second time fixing it, and I did mention to him on the phone, hey, bring our meter with you. You want to fix it, whatever you want to do, go ahead. He didn't seem to see any problem with it.
So if a call came in and someone said that they had a leak at their,
It wasn't a leak. It was that I wanted to do some work to the property, and I needed to be able to shut off the water. It wasn't leaking
May I
at
just
the
ask
time.
you to,
Yeah.
let's have this conversation through the chair, okay? It's not a back and forth.
Yeah.
Okay, I apologize.
So
I just feel that I did, I'm being told that I never made any effort to contact Mr. McKay, but I did on several occasions.
Okay, so that's your statement.
Okay.
No.
Mr. McKay?
If a call comes in and that someone wants, any homeowner would request that they needed to shut off the ball valve inside the house, we would come out and we would shut it off out in the street. We do not own the town of Millis. We own it from the curb stop, from the sidewalk into the water main. The homeowner owns it from the curb stop all the way into the house. That's how the water services. Sewer's a little different, but that's how it was. And if I would have asked, if it was an emergency, I would have said that then we will schedule something, please call back, and we'll turn it on, because there's an on and off fee for that. That we charge $30 to go out and shut the water off, and then $30 to come back and turn it on. I would have never said, ignore the letter, we'll get to it. I wouldn't have said that. I'm sorry, I've been doing this too long, and I write hundreds of these, I sign hundreds of these letters a year, and I would never have told a customer that we'll get to it, don't worry about it, we'll fix it later. That just wouldn't have been. We would have made the appointment, and we would have had somebody come out immediately. And especially if I knew we were going out to shut the curb stop off, and we wouldn't have brought the meter out, he would have had to come in. If there was a default in the meter, I would have told him, you have to pay either $125 for the meter and $125 for the outside reading device, because one of them is not working. And we checked the outside reading box, the box was there, and the wires were coming out of and they were going into the house. So we knew that it wasn't probably the outside reading device, because the gun can get that. Our computer system gun can pick that up. So we knew there was something wrong with the meter inside the house. And I would have never told anybody, we'll get to it later. That's just, I don't use that language.
Mr. McCaffrey, do you have any other questions? Mr. Jermaine, do you have any questions?
No, I'm going to pass on the questions.
Okay, do you have anything else you want to say, sir?
Yes, well, regarding that last statement, I didn't ask him to come out right away. I said, this is something that I'm going to be doing. It can wait. He didn't tell me to wait. I understand that. I said, it can wait, and he agreed with me and said, we'll get to it later. And I guess there's no point in going on any further. I've pretty much made it.
No, I want you to know, before we close this hearing, that the board was given a large balance of paperwork. So I feel like what we were asked to review was a lot of detail with respect to billing, correspondence, your viewpoints, and so everybody understands, we have not discussed this in any way, shape, or form outside of this meeting. This is a public session. So I can represent the integrity of the process, that I feel that we were provided the evidence at face value. So I don't think there's any other questions from the community, so I'm going to entertain a motion to close the hearing and we can deliberate.
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we close the hearing on the water abatement application for Mr. Lee.
Second.
So moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. So now we will deliberate. I want to thank everybody. I want to thank you, Mr. Lee, for coming forward. We're glad that you're a resident of the town. I want to thank the folks from the executive team from the town who are here late. So deliberation, discussion, we're being asked to make a decision on an abatement covering 16 quarters, 4 fiscal years. What are your thoughts?
I'll let you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm looking at,
Can you just grab the microphone so we don't get,
right.
we'll be hearing about that.
I'm looking at the pictures. I see the disconnect of the wires, which is a surprise to me, particularly for someone who is familiar with
I haven't seen them.
plumbing.
I've never seen them.
Well, I think they're in your house, so
So,
I don't know what to tell you. I mean,
well, assuming that the pictures are what they are,
Yeah,
that's what
right.
I see.
right.
I've listened to the discussion, the total amounts involved, but surprising me is I hear a couple of phone calls were made, but I see no evidence of a paper trail or anything on the part of the applicant here who's saying he followed up, but I see nothing there regarding that. I do see evidence of the town on numerous occasions over several years, having tried to contact him and getting very little feedback that we see in terms of any evidence. I understand where he's coming from, but there's an obligation, I believe, on his part to sit with the town and work the problem out, not wait 4 years for something to happen, and that never happened, that I can see. So from that perspective, I guess I can only look at what the most recent readings are and say, it kind of makes some sense to base it on the most recent reading and say, how do we move forward from here? But that's where I stand at the moment.
Mr. McCaffrey?
I agree with my colleague, and at this point, the evidence indicates to me there were efforts made on the town's part to contact the ratepayer. Those were unsuccessful, and when we finally get in there to do the reading, based upon the way we've administered our water system for the last 25 years, you're charged at the rate based upon the last reading, which in this case would be the higher rate for a portion of that.
I'm actually inclined to agree on the merits. Simply, I'm bothered by the 4-year run of no response that, and I think that this is an opportunity to educate the town at large, that if you receive a bill, it has an E on it and it says estimated, what that should do is it should trigger an immediate outreach on your part to the office of the DPW to say, for reasons I don't know, I have received an estimated bill for my water consumption. Why is that happening? To make sure that then the town can provide whatever remedy is apparently indicated with respect to your water reading, your water meter reading equipment, such that it would work properly and you would have an actual or an A indicated on your bill. So do we have a motion for this
Yeah,
hearing.
I will make a motion, Madam Chair. I make a motion that the application for water abatement by Zachary Lee be declined.
I'll second that.
So moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much for the effort. Moving along, we have agenda item number 041, which is appointment due to a vacancy to the Charter Review Committee. It has come to our revelation that unfortunately Lindsay McCamer has had to step down. She was, the way that the committee was formed is it's a 7-member committee. Each of the members of this board sponsored, if you will, 2 people who they felt would represent the citizens at large for exploring potential changes in the ways in which Millis does government, using the bylaws and the charter as our tools. And Lindsay was, in fact, my sponsored nominee. In her place, I would like to propose the appointment of Mr. Doug Riley, who I see is sitting before us. Doug is a longtime volunteer of the town. He currently sits on the Finance Committee, but I know he is here because he would like to enumerate why it is that he would like to step forward beyond what he wrote on his talent volunteer form. I also want to announce that today we also received a second resignation, that by Paul Jacobson, also a well-known volunteer of our town, and Paul was a sponsored nominee of my colleague, Mr. McCaffrey, so I don't know whether or not you would like to defer making a recommendation for a future
Well,
nominee.
Madam Chair, let me just say, at this point, I don't view any member of the committee as sponsored or owned by any member of the board. If we have a good candidate come forward, I am delighted that that person would be willing to step forward.
Okay.
And I would just urge the community members to think about the opportunity to serve on this Charter Review Committee now that we have another member who has resigned primarily because of change in his workload. I want to thank Paul for his work as
Yep.
well over many, many years, and I assume that he's doing other things for the town, and he will continue to do that. So I would urge any member of this board to work to recruit another member of this really important committee.
Definitely, and hopefully the website, I actually did hear that the website had come back online, but there is a talent development form that can be obtained through at the town administrator's office as well as online. But I would like to invite Mr. Doug Riley to sit before the board to indicate in your own words why it is that you have an interest wherever you would like, sir. You may sit or stand, it is completely your option.
Okay. Doug Riley, 258 Village Street. I'm here as a candidate for the Charter Review Commission. When I first heard about the commission, I was interested at that time. I didn't know what the process was going to be. The committee was formed and the candidates were chosen. When I was approached and given the opportunity to replace a vacancy, I happily said yes. I think it's an interesting opportunity to learn more. The Charter Review Commission is something that is supposed to be done every 10 years. I don't know when the last time was, at least that I heard.
1988.
Oh, so we're right on time.
Yep.
Okay, good. And so to me, it's just another opportunity to learn more and to engage with other members of the Millis community in discussion about how the town runs.
Any questions for Mr. Riley?
No, but I do have a comment. I've served with Mr. Riley on the Finance Committee. I respect very much his processes of thought, his way of working with others, and I think he'll be a valuable asset on the Charter Review Committee. And thank you for applying.
Any other comments? Yes, ma'am? You
Lisa
are.
Harden, the town clerk. I just have a comment about a possible conflict of interest that could come up, and because Mr. Riley's spouse, Nicole, is running for the position of town clerk, and one of the key topics that's going to be looked at is whether the town clerk should be made appointed or elected. So it seems like a conflict of interest to me, and I'm thinking that he should recuse himself from discussing that topic as a member of the committee. He could still sit in the audience and discuss it, but not discuss it or vote on it as a member of the committee. Correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a clear
Okay.
conflict. And he would be expected to recuse himself both from discussion and from voting on
Okay,
issues
thank you.
related to the town clerk's office.
Okay.
That
I
would
just
be my
wanted to-
view.
Well, that's my view also.
Well, I mean, it's
I would
important
be.
not only, whether it's required or not, it's important to bend over backwards so that people believe that
No problem.
deliberation is fair.
Easy enough done.
I don't think Doug would do anything other than that, frankly.
And that
I don't
would,
think I'd be allowed to.
that would only be while either she's running or is actually the town clerk.
Let's hope we get some progress before the election. Are there any other comments or questions? Thank you, Lisa. Anybody else? Do we have a motion on the floor? Yes, sir.
Motion that the board approve the appointment of Doug Riley to serve on the Charter Review Committee.
I second it.
So moved. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Thank you very much for serving on the Charter Review Committee. Very important, and a notice to the town. We do have one other vacancy left, so
Okay, thank you.
thank you very much.
I watched last week's meeting.
There you go. Excellent. We're glad you're staying in touch. Next up, somewhat by virtue of this, and I know that we've had some information sent, is whether or not maybe perhaps the Charter Review takes up to potentially update bylaw Article 5, Section 15, which is the article that has two crisp sentences that governs circumstances by which a board or committee member would be changed by virtue of high absenteeism. And as it's written right now, my interpretation, which seems to be supported by town council, is that basically you don't make that decision as a committee with respect to an appointee until after a full calendar year of service, which seems a little ineffective if you have a committee that you're expecting to be doing work dynamically. So this particular situation where we can now fill the other vacancy is resolved, but I just wanted to put it out there for discussion as a possible consideration for the committee in the future.
Well, Madam Chair, I
Yeah.
view that as clearly out of scope from the Charter Review Committee. I mean, we're asking them to review the charter, not to review the bylaws.
That's true,
On the other
yeah.
hand, if we believe as a committee, as a board, that the bylaw should be updated, then it's up to us to come up with a proposal. And given the fact that it's a bylaw, it would have to go to town meeting for town meeting
Right.
approval.
I was going to say, it's a
Yeah.
town meeting decision.
Yeah.
Correct.
Seems to me kind of ineffectual if you're leaving a position, it's kind of like the sewer problem, right? You're just leaving the sewer with no connection, and you're leaving a seat where somebody could contribute valuable input, and you're just leaving it empty. So I just think that from a management standpoint, if our commitment is to filling a committee with whatever the specified number is, if for some reason there's a reason, such as absenteeism, then another resident is being deprived potentially of an opportunity to participate. So I just wanted to raise it as something that I think this board should look at.
Well, I guess I look at it and say, if that's something that we think is worthwhile considering, it's a discussion item to be held in the future on that.
Yep. Okay, great, thank you. Yep. How are we doing time-wise?
Lisa Harden, 56 Walnut Street. Even though there's a year before you can not reappoint the person, there's nothing stopping the chair or the other members of the committee contacting the person and, encouraging them to attend, finding out what the problem is. Is it because they always, schedule it on a Wednesday and the person has to work Wednesdays?
Right.
Or, there's no, I think, I've been on some committees where it seems like the people on the committee don't want to reach out to the person. And they think it's your responsibility or something.
Yeah, okay, good, thank you. For the record, so noted. Agenda item 20043 is an interesting discussion, and that is that the town will be receiving 4 tennis courts, as part of the elementary school building committee's stewardship of the new Clyde Brown property, the court's land on town land, and in an interesting conversation of policy and sportsmanship, we convene here, and I can see in the audience members on all sides of this discussion, and the question that has been asked of this board from a governance perspective is how to incorporate and respond to the fastest growing sport in the country, which in fact is not soccer, but is in fact pickleball. So I believe the board has said in the past on the record, and I think it's from minutes in June of 2019, that the board in fact did support the notion of additional facilities for pickleball. So what brings this agenda item here is that the elementary school building committee, which is represented, I think, I see Wayne, out there, is asking this board for a decision as to how best to approach that. There are going to be 4 courts. There are 2 options. One is to co-line all 4 courts so that they can be used interchangeably. The other is to take one of the courts out of play for tennis specifically and install 4 dedicated pickleball courts. There are arguments for and against both options. I want to say for the record that prior to breaking my ankle that I was on a championship tennis team that practiced and had league matches on co-marked courts and were advanced to nationals. So I think co-marked courts philosophically are a practice that is well embedded in sports across America. We have obviously basketball and volleyball courts that are co-marked. I think if we were to look at the football field down the road, we would be looking how to accommodate lacrosse and soccer and football fields. And so here we are in a very common conversation, which is how are we going to co-mark pickleball and tennis courts, knowing that everybody can coexist. And so I'd like to open the conversation to my colleagues, noting that there are people from the school and from the Department of Recreation who would like to speak to this issue.
Well, I certainly would like to hear from the proponents of the different options. I'm most interested in trying to reach an accommodative solution. I do serve as the board's liaison to the Elementary School Building Committee. We did discuss this at our last meeting. At that meeting, we had asked the administrators to work together to come up with a solution. Apparently that has not happened, which is why we're here tonight. So I think we need to hear a little bit more about what the current view is. As I understand, the Elementary School Building Committee is looking to finalize this component of the project. And if we are to, and Mr. Klockow can correct me if I'm wrong, if we are to engage in painting some additional lines, wherever they may be, on those courts beyond the tennis, that would be a bit of a change order, so the committee would have to approve that. So anyway, I'd like to indicate my interest in trying to find a way that the community can utilize these courts and recognize the fact that the community owns the courts. The community has needs would like to see addressed. And I think there's got to be a way to do this, that people can get up from the table saying, okay, a full range of our citizens is able to use that public facility in a way that benefits everybody.
Mr. Germain, do you have anything to say before we invite people forward?
I tend to go along with what my colleague's saying. Before I weigh in on my thoughts at this point, and I have gone out to the internet, I've examined a variety of different options, I've looked at various types of lines and all sorts of things, but I'd like to hear what the parties have to say before I go much further in my discussion item.
All right, why don't we ask Chris Fogarty, who's the Director of Recreation, who can speak to the growing popularity of pickleball and her department's efforts to satisfy the demand with facilities. If you could come forward, that would be great. And just pull the microphone toward you, thanks. Oh, I didn't even see you. And Mr. Banks, Michael Banks is the Chair of the Recreation Committee. Thank you very much.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Fogarty, Millis Recreation Department.
Yep.
So, I'm not sure where to begin, but in a nutshell, pickleball is amazing, it's huge, it's growing, it's here. We currently have a program running in our gym with 1 court, and I gave you guys some information recently. So we started off spring of 2018. We had 15 participants. As of this winter, we have 53. So it's growing. It's huge with just the 1 court. I feel like we need to offer this to the community as a whole. By having the 4 courts over at the school with the new tennis courts, it benefits everybody in the community.
Can you just say for the record what you're requesting of the board in terms of your proposed scheme for the lines?
Right now, we're getting 4 courts. I would love to propose that we have one of those courts dedicated to 4 pickleball courts as their own entity. And then have the 3 tennis courts just be 3 tennis courts. Dedicated, we wanted dedicated courts.
And Mr. Banks, do you have anything to add?
I'd concur. That's our recommendation. I'm just looking at it from the total number of courts that could be used simultaneously, that 7 provides more recreational opportunities for the community at one time than 4 courts, and you get that with 3 tennis and 4 pickleball courts. Additionally, we don't go down the road of having to co-line the courts, and it also is much easier for people interested in playing pickleball to not worry about net adjustments. I did also find out that the width of the tennis net is not ideal to use for pickleball because they're quite wider because they're made for doubles tennis as well. So there's a couple of shots that you can do with pickleball. They're not that challenging, but they entail like stepping outside of the kitchen, which is the non-enterable box close to the net, and you can hit the ball basically like around the post. So that shot is very difficult to perform, if not impossible, on a co-used and adjusted tennis court. I also watched a video of the clip system. It would be something that users would have to set up each time they come to the court. It entails like putting a strap across the bottom of the court, on the court, between the 2 posts, and then having straps that go up over the net, and you tension them with tape measure to get 2 inches dropped at the center and the sides. So I think we're just going to see a lot more use if we just have dedicated pickleball courts. It does result in 1 less tennis court. You know, that is the one downside with this option. We did look at the averages from the National Rec and Park Association, which is kind of the leading authority on open space for communities. The national average is 1 court per 4,800 residents. So we feel that we would still be providing adequate tennis availability for a community the size of Millis by going with 3 tennis courts and the 4 pickleball court option.
Anybody have any questions for them before we bring up folks from the schools?
I'd like to hear the schools.
Okay. All right, thank you. I'm going to ask you. Yes?
How many players in pickleball?
So it's just like tennis. You can play 2 against 2 at the same time.
It's usually
But for the most part, it's 4.
So usually, yeah, it's 4 per court. So you're talking about being able to accommodate 16 plus if you were doing doubles tennis.
Why don't I hold off on questions until I get the, until I have the school folks, and then I'll open it up. Thank you. So somebody from the school, I see Denise Gibbons, and I don't know. Hello. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely, thanks for having us. Denise Gibbons, 8 Paddock Lane, school committee member, and also sit on the ESBC. So one of the things, and I'll defer to Mr. Klocko as well, but one of the things as part of the elementary school building project was that as part of that project, we're charged with replacing what was taken during the part of the project, which is 4 tennis courts. From a school perspective, and I believe Athletic Director Mr. Grant has shared this concern, is for matches that are held here in Millis, it will greatly extend the length of the matches. So to
By
take
how long?
At a minimum, an hour and a half. So we're playing in the afternoon, we're playing multiple matches, so now we're taking ourselves into evening hours by taking a court out of play.
How many matches are there per?
I don't know. We'd have to ask the school department. There's been quite a bit of discussion back and forth. We were actually a little bit of surprised to see that the two final options that were put forth for a vote tonight were ones that were discussed with the school, but that the school had great concerns about. So taking that one court completely out of play and allowing it to be solely for pickleball is one that both the tennis court and the athletic director had some large concerns over. Certainly very much in favor of pickleball, want to be able to leverage the courts, the 4 brand-new courts that we're getting as part of the school building project, to have all members of the community be able to use all 4 of them. Would also just like to preserve what we had prior to doing the school project, which was 4 tennis courts.
Can you tell us, in terms of teams, and, I mean, can you put some data against this first? Because we've heard we already have 50 players, and that would basically explode with the ability to have a league by virtue of multiple courts. Where are we with respect to tennis, boys' teams, girls' teams?
I'd have to ask. At 4 o'clock today, I got a notification from the superintendent that the 2 options on the table, I know it came earlier today, but just today, the superintendent got the 2 options that were being voted on tonight. So we didn't really have an opportunity to prepare any data to be able to bring this evening. So.
Do we have boys and girls teams?
I believe we do have both teams. We only have girls.
Would
Okay.
our
I don't
rec department
know.
have any knowledge of this?
I'm sorry?
Would the rec department have any knowledge?
No, it's really a school item, so I don't think they would know the number of the school players and the matches and the numbers that they have. Unless from previous conversations that you've had with the schools, that you have that information.
Is anybody?
Again, I'm going back to the original, which is,
I don't have accurate, so I'm not sure.
Okay.
so from a school impact perspective, taking one of the courts out of play would negatively impact the tennis team. That's the message from the school. We can certainly follow up with numbers to say how many players are in the program. It's something that's annual. It's also used by PE outside of the school. So we can follow up with that information and give that to you as a follow-up to the meeting.
Okay. Any other questions specific to the schools before I open it up to the community?
My understanding is that with respect to the ESBC, that you have to make a decision almost immediately with respect to how you're going to configure these courts, because they are getting ready to paint or do something. Is that accurate?
So because I sit both school and ESBC, and because we do have Mr. Klocko here, I might defer that question to Mr. Klocko as the chair of the school building committee. I'll let him answer that one. I don't think we need to know right at this very moment, because we have some time until that happens. But from a change order and approval process and costing out, I do think that it's timely for the decision to be made, so that we can have all the parties be able to cost out what option is decided upon.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Denise before I invite the town community? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Anybody from the town have a question, if you would come forward? I think Joyce was before you. Sorry. Okay, Scott?
We want to hear from Mr. Clark.
Scott Fusey, 411 Union. Who would maintain the pickleball lines? I mean, once they're laid down and put down, I mean, would it be an annual thing that the town would have to do, or the person who originally installs it? So, thank you.
I'll let the recreation director correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the lines themselves, once they're placed, they're permanent. So really the only maintenance involved, whether it be if they are just overlined courts and shared both with tennis and pickleball, obviously there'd have to be some provisions made to adjust the nets. That would have to be something that probably the rec department would be an additional task they'd have to work with the league on. If it were a separate court dedicated to pickleball, I think it would be the same thing. So I don't know if there's a large cost to that. It's just a matter of staff time, mostly, once the nets are purchased.
Ms. Boyardi?
Am I not correct in stating that these are town tennis courts? These are not school tennis courts? It was just under the, that the school was required to replace because they were removed, the others were removed or damaged or whatever, that it was just a requirement of the school?
I don't know.
I believe these are town courts. So I don't understand why there's such confusion as to what can be done with the courts. And I think that, and I believe, and I could be lying, but I think there are only 14 kids on the tennis team. So I don't know why we need 4 courts. I think it's being quite fair with the request of doing 1 court for pickleball. I mean, there are a lot, I mean, I see people playing all the time. I have also talked to residents who play and are frustrated because there's only one place to play. And when you've got 55 people using one facility, and you've got possibly 14 kids using tennis courts, I don't know.
I should ask Mr. Klockow to come forward. I apologize. I need you to wave, say, "I'd like to speak, please." Mr. Klockow, MVP, most appreciated town volunteer, and chair of the Elementary School Building Committee. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I don't have an opinion either way about pickleball or tennis. I would say, though, that having listened to everyone's comments here, I don't think the issues are mutually exclusive. I would encourage whoever the decision maker is, and I want to get to that point, to not consider this as the options as being mutually exclusive, because I don't know if there are 14 people or 40 people, but I'm not sure that they're playing at the same time the pickleball people are playing.
Right.
But I would say this to you. The Elementary School Building Committee's responsibility is to put back what was there. Those courts were damaged in order to facilitate the construction, and we're going to put back what was there. Of the 2 options that you have here, and it is not our decision, because our decision is simply to pay for and put back what was pre-existing. Of the 2 options that I saw this evening, the one option which puts 4 pickleball courts in one area would be an additional cost. There would be additional posts, there would be engineering, painting, whatever. And I would also advise you, I think, Mr. Germain, you raised this issue. Agostini Bacon, the contractor, their contract ends at the end of May. So the process of making a decision, issuing a change order, getting a price, getting the contractor to make the change, determining what the cost would be, for either option, frankly, is going to be, we're going to be hard-pressed to get this all done by the end of May. I would say, not as anybody other than a committee member on the ESBC, that if there was some minimal cost involved in painting pickleball lines in conjunction with restoring the tennis courts, it would be foolish for us as a town to do one and not do the other. I think they could be accomplished at really minimal cost at the same time. If, however, the option is to put 4 pickleball courts together on one court, that's somewhat of a different scope, and I think at an additional cost. And personally, I think that's beyond the scope of what the committee's charge is. So that's my opinion. I couldn't care less either way. Pickleball, tennis, have never played either.
You've missed out.
But the point that I'm trying to make is, if the 4 in 1 option is what is considered, somebody's going to have to pay for it. And it's not necessarily going to come out of the project. So I'll leave you with that.
Anybody else from the community before yes? Please,
Yes, I would love to say something.
Okay. All right, everybody.
Russell Parnes, 86 Middlesex Street, pickleball player.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Okay. The population of pickleball players right now, 53, not including those who wanted to play but couldn't play because there was a waiting list. The amount of seniors that become part of the population every year grows. So you're looking at today. Pickleball, as you said, is exploding, and it's definitely exploding. We can't find enough places to play. There's only one place to play, one court now. And in the summer, we can't even play there. So we have no place to play in Millis. So if you're looking for now, it only makes sense to give us 4 courts, because we know we could fill them, and we need some place to play. I don't think you're looking in the future, because this is going to grow. And if you don't put courts in now, you probably never will. So we really need the courts. We want the courts. We don't even have enough time to play during the year we want to play. We had 2 days in which we could play. We lost one day to the police department so they can use the gym. And that gym is utilized all the time. So we need a place to play, and during the summer, this is it. So you've got to give us this opportunity. There's a lot of seniors out there, and there's going to be even more next year and the year after that, so you've got to look to the future, too. So the tennis people, for the school, they have to play another hour and a half. I can understand that could be an issue, but when it comes to us seniors, we need this. And if you don't do it now, it'll never happen. Thank you.
My understanding, I don't know, Denise, if you can verify this or somebody can, but pickleball is also now a part of the curriculum in the middle school. Is that correct? Can somebody verify that? Yes on the record, no on the record? Yes. Okay. With mobile courts or something that are, okay. But they're in the school. Okay, so it's a hot issue, and there's people with great passion for sports, and we're trying to do our best for the community at large. I'm going to defer to my colleagues.
Well, I mean, I will be happy to speak up. As I indicated earlier, what I was hoping to have achieved by this point in time is that the school department and the municipal folks would have come together with a reasonable proposal that both sides could live with. And from what I understand in the context of some of the conversations, that has not happened. And at this stage of the game, we have 2 sides of the coin, and I'm afraid, folks, we've got finger pointing going on here. Not common ground, not working together, but blaming each other. I'm not going to sit here as a member of this board and have this degenerate into kids versus seniors. We're all part of the same community. Now, we all have to compromise in order to make this work. My personal view is that I would call upon this board and the school committee to ask the administrators of the departments to come together, work out a solution, and do it in 7 days. This is not trying to boil the ocean any more than we have to. The recommendation that has been put forth, in my view, by the Recreation Department is a very reasonable, cogent recommendation based upon the town's needs. But I want administrators to see it as their responsibility to work together to come up with a solution. Because this is just one of the things that the municipal side and the school side are going to be dealing with over the next several years, because we are committed to trying to find ways to work together on facilities management, personnel management, financial systems that we're already working on. And if we let this become the situation which poisons the water, that's a big mistake. And this is not pointing fingers at the administrators. It's really my responsibility as a member of this board, and hopefully shared by members of the school committee. We have got to work this out in a way that the everybody compromises, everybody gets some benefit. And somehow to have this elementary school building committee as the monkey in the middle is the wrong thing. They're just trying to get some closure on a project which they have husbanded for 5 years, or it seems like 500 years to them, and they're going to deliver to this town under budget. So let's give them some clear direction in a way that everybody can say, I got something, and I gave something. That's my view.
Microphone.
I couldn't say it much better. I will say this is one town. We are, according to Mr. Klockow, running out of time to make some decisions with change orders and everything else that are going to have to take place. If we make no decision this evening, and I defer to see a decision made over the next week from the administrators, as long as it's made in time for our next board meeting, which is next Monday,
During the day.
I think that's fine.
I agree. We can direct the town administrator and the recreation department director and the chair of the recreation committee, who may or may not be real eager and anxious to do this, having done what they've done so far. And I would ask that the school commit to the same situation. I don't want this to be emails exchanged back and forth. Everybody gets in the room and doesn't come out of the room without a solution. Now, if you tell me it's already happened, well, it was not successful. That I can tell you. And if we can't come up with something, then okay, the owner of that property will come up with something.
And I guess that's what I was driving at just a moment ago, which is a decision will be made, and it will be made no later than next Monday. I think that's a fair way of stating it. Hopefully, it can be made by the primary participants who will be involved. And I would think that there's no reason it can't be made that way. So, assuming that's reasonable and acceptable to the members of this committee.
Well, there's body language from the people who are going to have to do this work that indicates that they have some skepticism. Put the skepticism aside and go back in the room and see if we can work it out. And if we can't, then we can't. Then we're you might say we're here. And I call upon, not pointing fingers at anybody, this is something that requires the leadership of the town administrator as well as his colleagues. And I am expecting them, from my point of view, to reach out and set up a meeting with the others, I almost said the other side, our colleagues in the school department.
Madam Chair,
They're
yes,
all
we
members of this
will,
side.
we will work to set up a meeting later this week and try to get all the interested parties in a room and see if we can work a solution out, and we will make every effort to do that and report back next Monday as to the results of that discussion.
I would like to ask, as part of that presentation, that some data be made available. Looking at Denise, Denise is nodding. I want to understand everything with respect to the trends for both sports, the user history of the sport, of both sports. I've indicated I play tennis. I've done so on co-marked courts. I don't have any recall of moving nets, I have to be honest with you, so it's so frustrating. We all write checks to that school. For 25 years, we will be doing so, and I just wish that the whole mantra of big family really applied, so I'm really hoping that we can get some unity and some excitement with respect to delivering resources for people who want to participate in both sports. But I think it would be really important to understand the data and understand the usage. Obviously, a school team, their use of these courts is going to be limited to after-school hours and for whatever the playing season is. My understanding of pickleball, from what I saw the other night, people coming in looking like Eskimos, waiting to play, hoping that people weren't going to have come. People just came to hang out to see whether or not somebody hadn't come so that they could be a sub. Everything I've read shows that it's an upward trajectory, and I think everybody knows on the record, but I just want to state it, that the three presiding athletic associations, the United States Tennis Association, the United States Pickleball Association, and the MIAA, which governs interscholastic sports in Massachusetts, all permit for co-marked courts, however that is. So if we can come up with a solution of coexistence, I think everybody will be thrilled. And also, I just also think it's fair to put on the record that we charge the Recreation Department and their committee to self-fund a major portion of their budget, and they have indicated to us that having a pickleball league would be a big opportunity to not only meet a growing and unmet demand for court time, but also provide a vehicle to fulfill that mandate from a budget standpoint. Our meeting is a daytime meeting, so if people can't attend in person, it would be really important to send a proxy, but I agree with my colleagues that I kind of can't believe we have to referee this. It's ridiculous. And I'm really hoping that everybody can get together, and the cooler and calmer heads will prevail, that egos will not be allowed in the room of solution brokering, and that one solution will emerge that everybody can feel good about, so that we deliver to the town both tennis and pickleball. Any other further comments or conversation? Yep.
We have an ESBC meeting tomorrow. Do you, maybe Wayne could weigh in, but would it be helpful if the board at least asks that we get the pricing estimates for these options? Would that be helpful, or do you not feel that it's like to the level that it needs to factor into the discussion?
Well, let me just, from my perspective, if I'm going to get a recommendation from the management of my organization, I expect them to come to me with a solution. And part of the solution is, what does it cost? Now, if the cost is a rough estimate, fine. Right. But we're trying to make a decision here based upon need and cost. And, you know, this board, from my perspective, has been challenged by a pickleball player to not let this go. That doesn't mean that there isn't a way to do it. But clearly, there's skepticism on the part of Millis seniors that there's a lot of promise and not a lot of deliver. And that is certainly something that, from my perspective, is something I take very seriously.
Mr. Klockow.
I absolutely agree that any recommendation ought to come with the cost component. You won't have that by the time that you need to make a decision.
Right.
Yep.
We will ask our architect to go back to their drawings and draw up a cost for both options, or maybe there's a third option. I'm not
Can I
sure.
interrupt for 1 second, though? Because if there is 4 tennis courts are replaced, I mean, that's part of that's, as was indicated earlier, that was the original scope.
We own 4 tennis courts. Okay. That contract has been let.
Okay.
If we change it, then what we will be doing is asking that contractor to give us a change order.
Yep, that's what
with a credit
right.
for not doing one court, for, if you look at example B, just for instance. So if we say, we want a credit for not doing a tennis court there, and we want you to then give us a price for putting 4 pickleball courts there. My experience, not only on the 5 years of this project, but every other project that we've done for the town, is when you ask for a change at this last minute,
right.
You're not going to get the full credit for that one tennis court.
Yep, yep.
And you're going to get charged a premium to be building whatever it is that you decide that you want to do in short order. Mm-hmm. So that's the real world. That's what we will ask to do. So if we want to ask our professional designers to do something tomorrow night, we certainly can do that, but at this point, I'm not sure what it is that I would ask them to do.
Draw some pickleball courts.
Well, is it option A or option B or option C, D, or E?
I understand. And I'm not trying to be facetious about it. It's important, but I don't want to make my decision in a vacuum. On the other hand, I don't think the dollars are going to drive this decision, to tell you the truth.
Well, and
it may be excluded from the project. I understand that, because I am certainly supportive as the liaison that the school building project bond goes to pay for the school. That's what we appropriated the money for.
And that's what the restoration of the 4 tennis courts does.
All right.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I'd like to suggest that I see 3 alternatives, at least in what's here. One is that all 4 courts be lined for pickleball. One is that we have 1 court set aside that becomes a 4 pickleball court, and the others are lined just for tennis, and the third would be that plus the other 3 are also lined for pickleball. So you end up with potentially 7 pickleball courts, 3 tennis courts. I'm just saying, to me, those are the 3 options that I see in front of me at this point.
So on Monday, May 2nd, March 2nd, I apologize, we will be receiving a unified proposal with a recommendation. I'm seeing everybody shake their head. Or we will just look at everybody and we will just make a decision, which is insane that we cannot get along. This is about sportsmanship. Yes, and then I'm going to wrap this up.
Okay. I guess I was under the impression tonight you guys were going to make your recommendation.
We wanted to.
Well, I mean, we've met. I don't know what else you want us to do other than to, again, sit in a room. Clearly, nobody's going to be happy with anything.
Let me ask you.
But somebody has to make a decision.
We sat in the room with the town administrator, the superintendent, the rec director, the chair of the recreation committee, and the athletic director, in a room together at one time.
No.
Okay, that's what I want you to do.
Oh, okay. This is just really frustrating because.
It's really
frustrating.
I understand
Really
that.
frustrating.
Now it's like time's ticking. And if we're going to do it, we need to do it now.
That's why we're trying to make a decision that's, the best that we can accomplish. Unless a benefactor rolls in the next 6 days and says, I'm going to build 4 pickleball courts somewhere else, this is where we're at. We're trying to leverage the resource.
I understand, Madam Chair. People are going to be playing. So it's just kind of coming up with the best plan.
Yeah, to accommodate the growth.
For the entire community, not just pickleball, not just tennis. It's for everybody.
Yep.
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
again, I think there have been attempts made, but as Selectman McCaffrey has stated, we haven't gotten every single person in the room to have that discussion. Yeah, I think it is worth, and I agree with the board, worth 1 more week's time in an attempt to see if we can reach an accommodation that's acceptable to all parties before we get to the point where the board simply is just making a decision where people are going to feel aggrieved by that process. So I do agree with that process, and we'll go forward with a meeting later this week.
We just wish it had happened months ago. I didn't know we needed it.
I'm sorry, this is kicking the can down the road. That's all it's doing. And this is town property. Bottom line, this is town property.
Yep.
I've been in this town for 38 years. I don't play tennis, I don't play pickleball. Fair is fair. This is town property. I do not understand how the school committee can decide what can and cannot be done with these tennis courts, regardless if the school has to replace them. They had to replace them. You have a need and want. It's not just a want, it's a need. How long is it, when is the decision going to be that people that aren't in the schools and are residents of this town get to use town property? It's town property. It's not difficult. So I don't understand why we've got to kick it down, kick it down, kick it down, kick it down. Somebody's got to make a decision, and apparently all the different players are not choosing to play nice.
I know.
So I'm asking, as a citizen, as somebody who has lived here for 38 years, who has supported the schools, supported everything that's in this town, have been an active member, but has volunteered up the wazoo to just play nice, and can you guys just make a decision, because the players are not playing fair. It's my ball. No, it's my ball. No, it's my ball. It's the town's property.
I'm sure your sentiment is shared.
I think you're creating conflict. You get all these people on the courts, and I want to play pickleball? No, it's a tennis court. No, it's a pickleball court. It's just going to create confusion. It's going to make it more difficult for everybody. I think you have to have pickleball courts for pickleball players. Tennis people won't be playing there. You'll have an obligation to those people, and you'll set up the facility so that they can play. I'm telling you, with the nets, adjusting the nets and stuff, and all the additional lines you're going to put in there, it's not going to work. It's going to be a mess. So I think you really have to take a good look at it and make an obligation to take care of the seniors, give them their courts that are going to be utilized now and even more so down the road. I think the decision should be made. I don't think a further discussion is really going to do it. It's obvious to me that the school with 3 courts can handle that, should be able to handle that, and should not be involved. And as that lady said there, it should be a town or park decision on how best to handle it for the whole town. Not to have this interaction between these departments that is totally meaningless. Just make a decision, give us what you promised us when I was here last time, and I said, well, I'll believe it when I see it. And making a combination court, forget it.
Does anybody want to change their plan, of course?
I certainly do not want to intend to change it. I'm glad to hear from the community.
Yep.
And no one here has said that we've abandoned the separate court. What we've said is, let's go into a conversation with all the individuals, the stakeholders, because that's what reasonable and rational people do, because at the end of the day, not only are we going to have to live here, but we're going to have to live together, okay? Now, frankly, I think the passion that was shown here tonight is something that is real. I would hope that the folks who are going to have this conversation will be able to reflect that. And at the end of the day, I think this board is committed to making our recommendation 7 days from now. And you can be skeptical. That's fair. That's your prerogative. And I don't dispute that there's frustration. That's because certainly, if it's not clear to you, I'm as frustrated as you are. Because I sat in the ESBC meeting, asked the people to go and work this out, and here I am, a month later, and no progress. As a matter of fact, from where I see it, we're further apart than when we started. So that's not a good outcome. Look, we are paying these people, you and I, the superintendent, the town administrator, the athletic director, the rec director. We're paying them. We are the citizens paying them. I'm asking them to go fix this for me. And if they can't come up with a solution, I will then make my decision. That's my view as a member of this board. And I'm just one member. But at some point, I think this is what I expect them to do, because that's what I'm paying them to do. Not just go into their little hole and take care of their side of the coin. That's not what I'm asking them to do. Literally, these folks are being paid hundreds of thousands of dollars of your money. So you should expect them to deliver for you.
This is our community, all of us. And it's something that we should expect the people who have the responsibility to make a decision to do so. I agree with my colleagues. If it isn't made, it will be made by next Monday. But preferably, it's a community decision, and it's one that the key people who are responsible for making these decisions in the community will make. And that's what I look forward to. I dislike having to be the one who offers a directive, if you will. That's not appropriate if we can avoid it. But if it can't be avoided, a decision will be made. So please understand, I totally concur with what my colleagues are saying. This is something the community needs to work out and should work out.
Mr. Banks?
Could you just tell me what time that meeting is on Sunday? It's probably something I could look
It's
up.
not Sunday, it's Monday.
Monday. It starts at 2.
2.
2 o'clock,
So
okay.
we'll have the agenda posted by Thursday at 2.
Okay. And I
We'll
just
be here till 10, okay?
No, we
wanted
won't.
So you know.
No, we won't.
like, there are passionate, I don't even want to say sides, interests, whatever you want to say, but I do want to just make the comment that I feel like I really truly am approaching this from a community-wide, including the school. So I don't think it's quite fair to say that there's two competing interests, if you will. There is in respect to like one person favors one option, one favors the other. But if I was up here solely looking at pickleball, I would be talking about 16 dedicated pickleball courts and no tennis, possibly. I mean, that would be absurd, but that's not what I'm doing. So I'm just, for the people at home, really just want to get that out there. Thank you.
Lisa, and then you're going to have the last word, because we're going to move on.
Well, I'm not really going to have the last word. I just have a question. Lisa Harden, 56 Walnut. I had a question about who gets to use these courts when the Recreation Department doesn't have a specific thing going on, and the school doesn't have their team out there. Are they available to the townspeople? Are they locked up? Are they open?
They're open.
So
I believe they're available to the town.
They're open to the public.
They're public courts.
And they're lighted, so they'll be open until 11 p.m.
Yep.
So there's more than just like you were saying, there's more than just the students and recreation
They're
pickleball
available
people. There's
24 hours a day, 365 days a year.
till 8
Except for
o'clock.
when the matches are in
At
play.
night.
We actually have, the signage proposes 11 p.m. curfew, but I think
But if you want to be out there at midnight, we'll cheer you on.
That's all I wanted to.
Thank you. Well, hopefully everybody can learn how to play collaboratively and cooperatively, and next week we'll issue this. And I share the frustration of my colleagues, and I share the frustration of the speakers in the audience. It's town property. It doesn't seem like it should be so difficult. I don't understand why it is. It feels like this is a tempo that we should be changing. And we have to, because all we hear from the Mass Municipal Association is how we and every other 355-member municipality have to change how we do business. We have to change government. We have to work together. We have to do resource sharing. All of the things to reduce residential tax burden are the responsibility of every department to work together, to figure out how to work and leverage resources, how to share, and frankly, how to play nice in the sandbox, as I say to my grandson. So I appreciate everybody's attendance and passion. We're going to move on to something really riveting, which is to announce the closure of the town meeting warrant for May 11th, 2020. Sir?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As of 6 p.m. this evening, the warrant is technically closed, although, as the board is aware, you do have the authority to open and close that warrant at future meetings up until a later date in order to add or remove articles as the board sees fit. In your packet is a list of 25 articles on the draft list of articles. Again, the board at a future meeting will need to decide ultimately if all of these will stay or some of them will be removed, and if certain other articles may be added. Most of the articles on here are either fairly standard or are general business. Just to very briefly run down the list of articles on the list. First article is unpaid bills, I guess standard article. The next one is FY20, additional wages and expenses. That essentially allows the town meeting to move funds from one account to another to rebalance budgets if there are any particular budgets that need additional funding, and then to transfer that from other accounts that may have funding still available. The next item, item 3, is the AFSCME Council 93 contract ratification. As the board is aware, we are still in negotiations in regards to that, and should those negotiations carry on into next year, next fiscal year, we would need to have something prepared for funding of that. Article 4 is our standard operating budget for FY '21. Articles 5, 6, and 7 are our enterprise funds, sewer, water, and stormwater. Article 8 are annual amendments to the personnel plan. Article 9 is the Board of Health Appointing Authority, again, a standard article. Article 10, approval of the revolving funds. Article 11, approval of capital items. That article is usually submitted by the Capital Planning Committee for review by the board. Article 12, Community Preservation Fund. Article 13, Community Preservation Historic Resource Reserve Fund. Article 14 is for funding for the Board of Assessors FY '21 personal property interim year inspections. Article 15 is to look at adding supplemental real estate billing. We do plan on having the finance director and the assessor come in at a later time to discuss that item and the benefits to the community of that item. Article 16 is looking at changes to our senior exemptions to broaden and increase the exemptions for seniors in the community as far as their property tax bills. And then we have a number of lease funding articles. We have the new school bus lease, and then we have the previously approved computer lease for the schools, previously approved police cruiser lease. And then we have a few other capital items, the approved replacement of MHS lockers, the approved replacement of student desks and chairs. Again, these still have yet to go through the finalize of the capital committee, so this is just a draft. Medicare, Medicaid reimbursement services, that's a standard article we do every year in order to capture those funds. The unemployment insurance fund, so looking at putting additional monies into that fund, and then a standard OPEB funding and stabilization fund at the back end of the warrant. In addition to that, obviously, the board talked tonight about whether or not you want to look at any changes to the sewer bylaws. That's something that, again, would be determined by the board on whether or not you want to pursue that at the spring town meeting. And we did have one article submitted by a resident, not through a petition, but simply a request by a resident to have the board place an article in regards to MGL Chapter 33, Section 59, having to do with public employees and military service. Currently, I've asked town council to review that, and I will have some more information in the upcoming meetings about that proposal. So at this point, I would just recommend the board take that request under advisement. And those are the current draft articles that have come forward.
Does anybody have any
Madam
questions?
Chair?
Yes, sir.
I think that I'd like the town administrator to take a look at possibility of developing a separate marijuana host community agreement appropriation article. The reason I'm saying we should at least consider it is if we allow the HEAs to somehow get subsumed in the operating budget, and the HCA payment goes away after 5 years, we're going to have a problem. Now, there's no guarantee that it will go away, but the contract is certainly a 5-year contract. And when we first went into this, I thought, we'd end up with most likely getting some renewals and whatnot. There's been a lot of, let's just say there's a fair amount of back and forth going on in the legislature, and who knows what this law is going to look like 5 years from now. Now, this is not the same thing as the sales tax, which is that's not going to go away. But I just think we should consider a separate article for HCA appropriations, and as we have people requesting those appropriations, we would, in my view, identify not just how much, but where it went. That way, we'd also be able to justify, and if we're ever audited, that the payments are really impact payments. So I'd like to take a look at that, and maybe council can also weigh in as to the kinds of articles she's seeing in other towns. I'm just concerned that I don't want it to get absorbed into the budget. I think that's a dangerous thing.
And we can't be the only municipality asking those questions, so there's probably already a community with a best practice out there. I think that's
Right.
smart.
To take a look at it.
Right.
Take a look at it. I just
Perfectly legitimate to have a separate article that specifically
can assure the town that
targets.
there isn't going to, in fact, be real money here.
Right.
But I just want to be super cautious that we don't run into problems.
Right. No, I think that's smart.
Very good.
Yeah, I would agree. We received, thank the citizen for proposing a warrant article. I think there's just too much there for us to whisk that through some sort of review process between now and town meeting. And there's certainly revenue, or not revenue, budget implications for this. So I just think that this needs more time than getting it basically today.
Well, certainly not today, but I think
Yeah.
we need time, we need to
Yeah.
examine it and see what the implications are.
Examine it and
Right.
get back to the board with the
Right.
possible ramifications,
Yeah.
the pros and cons of
Right.
adopting it.
Right.
Because we do provide some,
Right.
but we need to understand what the implications are to
Right.
go to the extent that it's being offered, which, looks laudable on first blush, but may or may not have significant implications.
So we have already, in fact, done the motion for closing the hearing, so we don't need to
Don't
do
need to
that. This
take an
simply
additional-
was a
it is
notification.
closed.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, great. As a reminder to town departments, we're all working on our annual report drafts. So for those who are within earshot, this is a reminder that those are due. Final item on regular scheduled business is fiscal year '21 operation budget planning. Mr. Germain.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have, if I can ever get the cord, a basic presentation, which, you know what, I'm going to have to,
There it is.
ta-da!
While you're doing that, I want to address questions that I have had, questions and criticisms with respect to the video available from the day of budget hearings, which was January 8th. We have to figure out, and we were actually expecting a list of services from Millis Community Media. I want everybody to understand, Millis Community Media is not owned by the town. It was, I guess, divested by the town in a budget decision, and is now funded through user fees paid to Comcast and Verizon. And so it's an independent entity, and that organization provides to us a scope of services, which we are still obviously in need to clarify, because the videos from that day have not all been posted. I'm told that they are being worked on, but the situation was less than ideal, so we need to figure out how to work with them better and how to make our equipment copacetic to theirs. So I just want everybody to understand there's no obfuscating of the hearing content. The intent was to be totally transparent. I consider personally the budget hearing to be one of the most important hearings of the year, and it comes as great frustration that the video that would have provided to the citizens the give and take of the conversation, not just the presentation by the department directors themselves, but in fact, the interplay with this board asking questions. I think it's a loss to the community to have not already had this up. It's a source of frustration. The town administrator knows it, and but we are actually kind of powerless to do anything about it. So I just want everybody to understand where we're at, so that I don't continue to receive inquiries from both inside town hall and from residents as to where the videos are, with some inference that there's some reason why they have not been posted. So, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to present some thoughts. They're not a series of cohesive decisions as yet, but some thoughts on how we might look at the way in which we approach the budget and budget allocation in the coming year. And so what I wanted to do was to give some idea of some of my thought process at this point. I haven't obviously had a chance to review any of this with the board or anyone else, so this stage I'm going to move through on giving you some of my understanding of where we're at, where we're likely to be going, and some of the issues that we might want to consider as we consider ways of re-examining how we deal with our budget. Let me point out, this is not dealing with the entire budget. If I look at the budget, there are two aspects, and I'm simplifying this for the audience in particular. There's one portion that says we have fixed costs that we have an obligation to pay, whether it's salaries, insurance, a whole variety of things, including leases that are already in effect. What remains is what I'll call the discretionary funds. And in the past, we've tended to break that and say, okay, a portion goes to one group, another portion goes to another group, work with that portion that you've got, and move forward. Well, the town has changed. The last time when they put that together, it's unclear quite how they arrived at that distribution. I can't get clear answers other than it resolves some problems in terms of what I'll call internecine fighting that was taking place at the time. So as I look at it, that process right now has become formulaic. We accept it without seeming to question it specifically. It does minimize confrontation, which was what the original process was set up to do. And at the time, 25 or so years ago, it met the needs of Millis, which is all very nice, but times have changed. Our town is a different town today than it was 25 years ago, or whatever that time frame is. I'll use 25 as the basis for moving forward. We have a lot of new requirements. It doesn't take much imagination if you drive around to see we have a few problems on our roads. We know we have some problems with culverts. We know we have problems maintaining buildings. There are a lot of other issues that have to be dealt with in this town. We also, as a town, are dealing with lots of new laws that didn't exist when this original compromise was reached. And it's from that perspective in particular that I look at things and say, we have new obligations, we have new commitments. For example, building department has laws they have to implement that cost more than they did in the past. We have laws that deal with how education is handled in certain groups and schools. Just many laws that didn't exist before and that are potentially underfunded, if funded at all. So they were originally presented to the community as they would be funded at some level. That hasn't happened. So we have that. We also have costs to the town that have escalated, whether it's insurance costs, salary costs, a whole series of other things that have taken place over this period of time that are different than what our town was 25 years ago. In addition, we have a change in the demographics of the town. We have a population that's a little more aging than it was, approximately 25% of the town. We have a lot of infrastructure that I've mentioned, and we have personnel costs. Many of these things were never at this level when we originally implemented the original divisions that were set up to solve some of the original problems. At the same time, we have new standards that have to be met. We saw some of that this evening when we were talking about sewer issues that we're confronting. We have some aging systems. We've seen many breaks in our water mains that have to be dealt with. The bottom line is that we have ongoing repairs, whether it's replacement of major equipment, repair of equipment, repair of buildings, long-term issues, all of which have to be dealt with, and for which there's only a limited amount of discretionary funding, if you will, whether it comes out of reserves, free cash, or whatever. We also have new needs for public safety, whether it's additional ambulances to meet the new communities like the Toll Brothers that are being put in. whether it's new types of equipment that are being required. We have equipment requirements by law to replace equipment that ages over a certain period of time. There are new training requirements. There's a lot that's going on that we have to deal with that didn't even exist. And one of those that didn't exist 25 years ago was an IT infrastructure, as one example. I'm not saying it's the major one, but believe me, it's consuming significantly more of our budget than any of us would like to admit at this point. And it will consume more as we have fewer people who are willing to volunteer as much time as they have to continue to support the IT systems. So a lot going on in that area. We need to think of how we deal with this discretionary funding in terms of one community. And from my perspective, and again, these are my views, I don't mean to imply that they're the board's views. I'm proposing that we take a different look at the budget than has been done in the past. We begin to identify the annual costs for many of these functions that have to be dealt with. We need to identify not just the fixed costs and the required costs, but what are some of the other costs coming down the road, whether it's maintenance or anything else. There are costs. Maintaining a sewer system, yes, it's an enterprise fund, but guess what? It's a tax on those who are paying for it, so it's a cost to them regardless of how we want to look at it with respect to the community. We can begin to look at how we can help ameliorate some of these costs through the use of grants, legislative earmarks, a variety of things. I'm not suggesting this is a comprehensive list, but we need to think better and use our resources better to find additional opportunities to help defray some of these costs. In addition, we can begin to look at how we manage our community as a whole. Why not begin looking at better use of our shared equipment where possible, maybe sharing personnel where it's possible. I don't mean to infringe on union contracts or anything like that, but again, we can begin to look at that. Take facilities, take our fields, for example. Are there ways we can share the equipment and the personnel to better manage the fields that we've got and give us better bang for the buck? So it's this kind of thing I'm thinking about. We also have to prioritize all of our needs in our community. And I come back to a model that I refer to my colleague here in what was put together on the Capital Planning Committee. They have, in fact, come up with a wonderful way of demonstrating to the community the long-term, short-term issues that we're confronting and where we're going to have to put money today and in the near future, as well as in the long term, to maintain what we've got, much less move forward and equip new things that come on down the road. And so I'm proposing that what we do is set up a similar kind of plan for those other items that aren't capital, that aren't absolute needs that we have to deal with, whether they're leases, personnel, health, insurance, whatever, and begin putting them into a similar kind of a plan, if you will, where we begin to understand, and believe me, every department gives us a list every year of what they would like to have beyond level funding. They know what they need or would like to have to run their departments better. We also know what we need as a town to run our infrastructure better than we've been doing it. So let's begin putting that down on paper and prioritizing it, much the way we did with our capital plan, so we can begin to understand the cost factors involved. What's it cost when we defer doing some of the things that our colleagues in the departments are saying they really need to have done? What are the implications on employee performance, on the lack of employees to get certain work done, on the utilization of employees across multiple areas that might better utilize the talents that we've got? And I'm saying let's look at all of that in terms of potential for our use of the available dollars that we have, which are few. To that end, and this is something, again, we all have to think about, particularly on these committees, is we set up some kind of a subcommittee on the tri-board to begin examining some of these options and see if there, in fact, is a format we can put in place that helps us to better identify and prioritize what these needs are. Where's the funding going to come from? What types of funding do we have to deal with these needs? How long is it going to last? Is it funding that we can see going year after year? Is it funding that is only a few years and then it's going to dry up? Is it funding based on grants that we received and could be a grant that says, hey, we had to bring on board certain people, certain equipment, and suddenly the grant is no longer there, but now we have an obligation based on that. We have to watch out for that type of thing. By the same token, we ought to be looking at ways to better use that grant money to help defray our costs. Are we making the best use of what we can to apply for grants and new opportunities? So I'm just saying there are a whole series of things I believe we might look at to better manage what we've got and to look at a better way of prioritizing the use of the funds that we have. And this will cross all departments. Every department in the town has to be able to look at this, look at the way in which things are coming down the road that are going to be mandates, maintenance, or any of the other things that we take for granted that aren't capital. These are not the capital needs. We know we have capital needs. But on top of that, how are we going to fund all these other needs that we've got? Some of them will overlap. I don't deny that. But we need to begin being proactive rather than reactive as to how we proceed for the future. We want to come out of this process with an acceptance, I would hope, from the tri-board, and as a result, what we want to do is form a committee, I think, which makes reasonable sense, to begin looking at this, establish the guidelines, and establish a timeline for the deliverables of how we can proceed with something like this. I know it's a lot. I apologize for the amount of time that I took, and it's not necessarily all clear, but I think time has come to take a different kind of look at the way in which we divvy up the budget. Madam Chair, I apologize, but
No,
that's
it's
my-
very ambitious. I think that the message is out that government as usual cannot work because the pressure, the financial pressure is borne by residential taxpayers. And what they've said to us is, we can't do this. There has to be a different way. And what it does to me is it underscores the conversation of earlier tonight, which is until we have one community versus two very divergent players in the budget process, I mean, I would love to be optimistic. I love bold thinking. You know, I think I think that a subcommittee of the tri-board would only work if it's got more than 3 people. And maybe it's not necessarily members of the tri-board that are on it, but you pull outside, like the capital planning model, and you pull outside of that organization. But I think the polarization is real. I think that everybody is going to be very protectionist in terms of what their resources are. And until something really changes philosophically, I can't see everybody saying, you know what, let's figure out how to redo IT, because we really need to. And there shouldn't be such a dichotomy between the resources in one area of our town and the resources of another. Same thing with facilities management. We've had organizations come to us. They've gone down the road. I was looking at some of the minutes before this meeting that reflect direction that this board provided to a specific sports group that had a specific interest in fields. But again, all the stakeholders are not seated at the table. People work in silos. And until that changes, until everybody sits at the table and realizes that they all have to play nice in the sandbox, to overuse that saying, you know, I think this is born out of frustration. I love reinventing, but everybody has to be all in on it. And I don't know what it's going to take to get everybody to be all in. More tax bills? I don't know. So that's my comment. You know, I really appreciate big thinking. So, and I think that 2020 reinventing government is real. And people, and I will say, and you know I've commented on this, that out in the, it's very easy to hit your keyboard and complain, but I think that this is a real mandate. It's a call to arms and opportunity for the community who says we can do better. And I think what I'm hearing you say is, join us and let's make it better. And I think the Capital Planning Committee is a great model to cite. Those are my comments.
Well, I certainly appreciate your formulation here. I think there's a short-term issue here and a longer-term issue. The short-term issue, frankly, is how are we going to proceed with the balance of the fiscal '21 budget process? We've operated under a model that has allocated new revenue 65-35. I think as other members of this board have indicated, and certainly I have experienced this with my fellow residents, feel as though that needs to be re-examined. Now, that clearly is not a universal view, because re-examined equals it changes, which means somebody gets more and somebody gets less. Well, as long as the whole pie is growing, that shouldn't be a big problem, but be that as it may. We've seen a proposal that has been drafted and being actively considered by the Finance Committee to change the methodology to simply look at it from the point of view of a percentage increase in the existing budgets. And I know that it's earnestly looking through that. As a member of this board, when that concept was presented to the tri-board meeting, I think both myself and Mr. Germain, who were the board members present, expressed our concern that that was not reflective of what we had hoped would be developing. And I continue to have that view. I think that that particular formulation really is just the same story in with different terms on it. Because if you do the numbers, basically it turns out to be the same outcome. So that is not what I was looking at as a member of this board or as a leader of the town as a way to re-examine the budget. Now, I believe, this is my personal belief, that to try and make that major change for fiscal year '21, even though that may be what one of the boards would like to do, is unrealistic. I am not in favor of changing this thing in a substantial way for the coming budget because it's too late. Now, I'm going to hear from the same people who said, well, you kicked the can down the road an hour ago. What a surprise you're kicking the can again. Well, substantively, we have to bring a group together to work on this actively, I believe, and I agree with my colleague. It isn't simply 3 members of the boards. It should really be a task force of people working. And we have a finance director. We have a finance director from the school. We spent a lot of money in bringing together the accounting system so that when we're finished, we'll be able to have everybody have access to the numbers. But that doesn't get at the fact that the conversation has to include, in my view, a realization, as my colleague indicated, that the relative needs of various constituencies within the community has changed, in my view, from what it was a long time ago. If we don't consider the reality of what the town is today as well as what it's going to become, then we're going to continue to run a budget that doesn't reflect the needs of our constituents. And we have to do that. I mean, I think that if we don't have dialogue on that issue, then we continue to have a problem of just multiplying last year's number times 1.4 or 1.04 or whatever it is. It just doesn't change anything. That means people have to be willing to talk about the changing issues, and they're changing issues in our demands. There are changing issues in the way school funding works. There's been a major reform in the school funding formulation, which, from Millis's point of view, is a gigantic non-event. Didn't do us any good. I don't think it's hurt us any, but certainly it's not something that our particular community is going to benefit from. So I think that we need to really work on that for the 2022 budget. And if people are not, as my colleagues have indicated, people are not committed to doing that, then we're going to have some conflict on town meeting floor because the changes of the demographics are real. And I would say, for those of you who are part of who had the opportunity to either attend or see it perhaps in some way, shape, or form, the tri-board meeting, there was a clear statement from one of the members, which I really rang true to me. This town has executed a longer-term strategy with land planning and whatnot, and policies which have brought to the town the potential growth in a population segment over 55, which will not be here with demands on the education system. That was not inadvertent, that was intentional. It took us 20 years to get here, but now it's beginning to happen. So what is the outcome there? Since there's a growing demand for services for that cadre of the population, how do we recognize the fact that that's actually there and it doesn't put any burden on the school department? Not that it's us versus them, but let's face it, this policy is working. It's worked to the benefit of the community. We have to be able to find a way to articulate that and bring it to fruition. We've worked on bringing new business, such as the marijuana business, to town. Not universally supported by the citizens of this town, but supported by this board and the other boards as well, because it was a way to raise additional revenue. Additional revenue, which it does in fact create some additional pressure on the school department, because clearly you want to allocate some of the funds to that generation to help them with education, but also for other elements of our population. So I think we have to recognize that we are now at a point where some of the long-term policies are beginning to come home and benefit the community. We should look at that and not just run this thing on the same track at the same speed, et cetera, et cetera. And last but not least, as my colleague indicated, there's got to be a component here which says, okay, we are in a place where we can begin to deliver some tax relief, either through, through gradually slowing the increase of taxation or finding ways to, pay off our debt more quickly. Not simply to build more stuff, but to provide some tax relief. And so this is very grandiose, I know, but if you don't get a group that's committed to do that, then you're not going to get anywhere. And I think that I agree with my colleague. It can't simply be the tri-board meetings were intended to be a dialogue, or a trialogue, I guess, among the boards, so they would talk periodically about what the issues are. It's not really an operating group, but it has been successful in having some exchange. Now, it's reached its first challenge, which is dealing with this issue, and at this point in time, has not quite been successful in resolving it. I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but I think we have to accelerate the process and emphasize it more, and we have to have folks working on it who, who's part of their job, whether it's the finance team and the administration of both major functions in town, and eventually you bring in department heads and get them to come to you with new ways of thinking. And I really think that you're never going to get anywhere with shared services like IT, facilities, fields, HR, unless you bring the managers together and say, okay, managers, what we want you to do is develop a plan for implementing these things over a period of whatever it is, 2 or 3 years. And if the boards don't tell them that, not that they're bad people, they won't do it, because that's not how they think. There's no offense intended.
None taken.
So it has to come from the leadership, which ultimately brings you back to the tri-board, and I think it's absolutely incumbent upon the operating committees, if you will, the select board and the school committee, to take the lead here and really work this out. And if we can't do it, well then, shame on us. I mean, I think that's a critical component of this. I am concerned about trying to make a change that's not really a change for 2021. I don't think that's a good idea. And that is actually quite time urgent. And I believe that, this board has to make it clear one way or another that we will work on our budget based upon this paradigm, this direction. And if we don't agree with some of the other thoughts that are going on right now, then people have to know that sooner rather than later.
I just wanted to add 2 other thoughts. One is that I think it's really helpful organizationally. I've done a lot of goal setting when you attach budgets to goals. And this board established goals for the town. So to the extent that that's attached to whatever new process emerges in terms of budgeting, it seems to me that
Yeah, I agree.
every department should
Has
be
to be
supporting specific goals so that the citizens can see the connection.
Well, to your point, if we have a goal to try and consolidate IT, that means department heads that have an IT interest are working toward that, not
Right.
against it.
Exactly. The other thing is that what I've seen, and it's probably largely due to collective bargaining commitments is that we don't do zero-based budgeting. And that may be institutional for all government, that you kind of, we always start from where we were, we protect it, and then we move beyond that. And rare do you see situations where a department says, well, we can reinvent ourselves, we could resource share, we could do this or that. It's all about, well, we're not changing any positions, we're not changing any employees. So I think the whole dynamic, I mean, if you want to rebuild it, you have to rebuild it from the bottom up.
Well, a level service budget is guaranteed to provide you almost no change over time.
Well, I think it's really good thoughts, and, I'm generally an optimistic person, but I was a member of the Go Nowhere 65-35 Committee of Three, so I think it just needs to be, that type of approach needs to be broadened.
A proposal emerged one way or the other, and I'm just saying that from my perspective, that proposal is not responsive to what I think this board was looking to try to accomplish. And I'm not criticizing anybody, because they worked hard on it. I just don't see it as the way to go forward. And for us to, I believe we need to make clear what we think the process is going to be, or what we're going to do when we ask our department heads and our administrator to develop a budget based upon, and we've used the revenue parameter to help us prioritize, not by need necessarily, but by the dollar amount, which is a different,
It's a different
but,
dynamic.
it is February 24th, folks. We got 6 weeks, give or take a nickel, to finalize this thing. So I don't know whether the board wants to just take a formal vote, that we will proceed on the basis of asking our team to put together a budget based upon the traditional allocation, pending, our commitment to working on this. And really, you start working on it June 1. You don't start working on it November 1. You just can't.
Right.
Maybe 30th.
I concur with what you're saying, that it's too late in this process to make a change, so we go forward with that process, but we will guide it, and we will begin to put some substance behind how we will proceed for the future, starting with June 1, and I have no problem with that.
I agree with that.
There you go.
Well, we can start with May 1 if you'd like.
Yeah.
Just so you can weigh in for a week.
There you go. 3 days of weighing in.
But it's not right for us to just not take a position right now on
Yep.
how we're going to put the budget together.
I think I say it like I'm a broken record. We cannot continue business as usual. That is evident in how, where we're at in the most recent round of residential tax bills. Period. Done. We have to change our policy with respect to sewer so that it's more equitable. It's too costly for too few population of ratepayers. We've had that conversation. And these are things that are not about how Millis isn't doing business well. These are responses to your point, Pete, that the orbit in which every municipality in Massachusetts exists is different. The world of unfunded mandates that keep coming at us is something over which we have no control but every obligation to provide a response. And when you provide a response, it includes people and it includes resources, budgets. And that changes the dynamic of what we think we're going to do versus what other outside forces tell us we're going to do.
Well, we're stuck right now with, as my colleague said, about 6 weeks. We have decisions to make between now and then, and they have to be presented to the community so they can make their decisions on how they want to run their community. And it's too late in this budget process to change the formulas at this point, I would say. But let's agree that we'll move forward this term as per most of the way we've done it in the past, with the understanding that come whether it's May 1 or June 1, we're going to start looking at another way of doing things.
I think Mr. McCaffrey has it right when he says we pay, as taxpayers, a lot of talent, a lot of experts, a lot of really knowledgeable people. I don't think we need to go out and be paying consultants to do this thinking. We have it all in-house. We just need everybody with that knowledge to have the same level of passion and commitment to change. And if they all arrive trying to protect their corner of the universe, then they're never going to resource share, and they're never going to think outside the box. And I don't see that changing unless something cataclysmic happens. But it's a whole philosophy change. It has to happen. We've all attended the conferences. We've heard it. And we've seen it in programs that are, collaborations between different communities to build public safety dispatch centers or whatever it is. Share. There's some things that are hard to share, but there's other things that absolutely can be shared. And certainly we should be doing a better job of sharing within town. And taxpayers expect us to be able to do that. And so it's also an opportunity to say to the community, volunteers are driving this conversation, so jump in. We would love to have you, right? Do you feel like there's an
Certainly, help
action
is
plan?
good.
Yeah.
Well, what I would like the board to do is take a position on FY '21. I mean, we've got to give our folks direction. Otherwise, we're never going to have a budget. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean that the school committee or the finance committee will agree with us, but that's fine. I mean, I think that's the only practical out at this stage of the game.
Yeah, I do
would
too.
propose
But I
to do-
further, as Paul said,
Yeah.
I am not in favor of this going beyond this fiscal year.
Yeah.
And I would commit to trying to make some changes in that.
Yeah, and since we're supposed to have, I'm looking at the finance director, ClearGov, we've spent $15,000 of taxpayer dollars on a system that has not been operating. And my patience with that personally, I'm really frustrated with it. And I know we've been doing Munis, and we keep hearing about it, but we need these tools.
Carol Johnston,
Yeah.
Finance Director.
Yeah.
I just want you to realize
Yeah.
that there's a wealth of information on ClearGov that's out there for you if you want to do comparisons with other communities. The thing that's not out there is the open checkbook. I believe that that's the issue that you're concerned with. And as we explained before, the auditors are just about complete with the FY19 budget audit. And once we get that information, and we're working on the chart of accounts, we've done our first pass for a test, that the next move on for the town accountant would be to get the ClearGov up with the open checkbook and have that information for the town up there. So I can understand you're frustrated. I understand a lot of us are frustrated that we have a lot on our plate. We're doing the best we can. I think we're making great progress, but it's not good for my staff or my morale to hear that we're not as effective as you'd like us to be.
And I would say, if I may, I think the finance department's been doing an outstanding job. We've had to, in my discussions with them, had to have prioritized the Munis conversion, because as far as the open checkbook and the other aspects of ClearGov that'll flow from that, that is the critical piece right now, and the piece we need to operate effectively with the new financial system. Certainly understand the frustration with the timeframes these things take, but I think once things are up and running, and we get to a point where we're able to see things in real time, once the Munis system's up and fully running, I think the wait will be worth it. So I certainly want to send my thanks to the finance team for their work, and I think that everyone will see the fruits of that in fairly soon.
So March 16th, can you come forward, do you think? Do you think it'll be ready then?
Oh,
Like, if
I'll
it's not
be here,
voting right
you know, whenever you want me to come and speak to you, I'll be glad to come and speak to you. I can give you the status at the time. It may not be where you want it to be at that time, but we're moving forward with everything that we're working on. The only caveat was, right from the beginning, the ClearGov was going to take a back seat because these other things took priority. So it's not that it's not that we're not thinking about it, it's not that it's not on our radar. The ClearGov representative was just switched, so there's a brand-new ClearGov representative that the town accountant will be working with, and we're getting to things as quickly as we can. Ongoing operations, there's a lot that goes on just in ongoing operations, never mind special projects. So.
Well,
Just want you to be aware of
okay.
it.
No, I appreciate that, and our views are shared, I guess, on the record. I just know that it was a really big priority. Jim championed it, and we've spent $15,000 on it, so it's
Over the
hard.
course of time, I think you
years.
have 2 years, but there is a wealth of information if you want to go out there and do a comparison between different communities. You can certainly go and do that.
Madam Chair, I think that we need to provide a direction, as my colleague here said, in terms of how we proceed for this year's budget.
Well, were you planning on us changing, with that presentation, changing FY '21? Was that kind of your intent, or were you
Well,
putting ideas in place for
Putting
future?
them in place so that I agree, starting with May 1st, June 1st, whatever, let's begin reevaluating. But to make any change at this time is probably not appropriate, not even doable.
Right.
We may tweak some things, but I think we need to provide the direction that says we concur with doing as we've been doing for the remainder of this budgeting process, if that's a fair way of stating it.
Well, I agree. I mean, I think what, this board, is committed to making a fundamental review of the budget allocation methodology for fiscal '22. But given the time constraint, we think we need to the extent that it's reasonable and rational, and it's always tweaks here and there, proceed on that basis, the current basis for the current fiscal year.
Right.
I don't think we need to take a position on that. I mean,
Well, I think we
vote.
do, because we have the other groups going along their way,
Okay.
making their decisions. And if we don't take a position, then we cede the ground to them, and that's just not what I believe we should be doing.
I think we are responsible for taking a leadership position in
It's
this.
our budget.
And we are held accountable by our community for that.
Want to make a motion?
I think I just did, which was we'll proceed with the budget for this year in the same manner as we have in the past. We may choose to tweak it a little here or there, with the understanding that we're going to start a major reevaluation of how we want to proceed for the fiscal '22 budget, if that's a fair way of stating
I
it.
second that. Just with one, I think technically what we're doing is we're directing the town administrator and the finance director to complete the budget process, because this is the way we're going to propose these things to the other stakeholders. We would ask them to agree,
Yes.
but at this point in time, we have to give our team direction. Otherwise, we're going and we're making up numbers as we go along, and that's just not a good idea. So with that slightly amended, I would second that.
So moved, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries unanimously.
Madam Chair, and
Yep.
if the board would so like, I will be attending the Finance Committee's meeting this Wednesday evening. I can certainly formally relay that to them at their meeting, that that's the board's position on the process moving forward into FY '21.
That's good, we have two, I think that's great.
I think that's what we should do.
Yeah.
I mean, we shouldn't be leaving them without knowing where we stand either.
Yep. We have two consent items, draft meeting minutes. Anybody have any comments for the minutes of January 27? I do, but the comments would require looking at the video. The narratives have to do with the discussion about the electrified softball sign, and then the discussion that immediately followed by the parties that proposed the softball fields restoration. And I'm really clear that they emerged both with the conversation around, first of all, I don't think we ever said just erect the sign. So again, I think we have to go back to the video. I think what we said was, this is not as simple as just one group coming to the table saying that they wanted to secure some funding to improve the softball. The fields are a broader ecosystem. There was a lot, it's just like the same microcosm of the conversation we had earlier. You know, you've got the DPW that's affected, the schools that are affected, the recreation department that's affected. You've got some budgetary issues with respect to electrification, the build-out, contractor, all of that stuff. So I'm pretty sure that that was an example of a presentation that was asked of this board by a student where the ask was extremely complex. And I don't believe we sent the student off and said, that's a great idea, go make it happen. Because I don't think that student is in a position to do that.
So do you want to make a recommendation?
The
of what I should change
recommendation
it
is,
to
I
and
don't
move
remember the,
forward?
I think it has to, I think
Neither.
we have to go back and look at the video, which I
Okay,
did not
that'll
do.
take some time.
Yeah. So I just think that those two-pronged conversations emerged with, please come back with a plan that has everybody that's connected to fields involved in the conversation. And I see that we just received a proposal for the CPC meeting that sounds like that didn't happen, that a group just kind of went forward, and they're not at all connected to the DPW or anything. So I don't know how we fix this operationally, but you have one group spearhead going ahead, and the impact of what they want to do, which is laudable and great, but it impacts other departments, and the other departments aren't involved. It's the same problem we had here tonight. So, I mean, we got this big package about a CPC presentation next week, representing approvals to move forward, and the DPW department is going to end up inheriting this and is not a part of it at all. So I don't know if
Well, I
that's...
don't know what that has to do with the minutes, but if the minutes need to be fixed.
Well, it's just, the
let's
minutes need
fix
to be
them.
fixed. I just don't remember what the, the
I don't know
exact
what the
words are.
CPC sent, because I haven't seen
If
it.
anybody
Okay.
has a suggestion, I'll try to find
Yeah.
it.
So we're not going to vote on those.
No, not on
Okay.
that one. I don't know if anybody has,
Well, I have one on the 10th.
okay.
Selectman Barnes made a motion to appoint Jane Harden as a Tri-County School Representative for Millis. The motion was seconded. Mark Conroy, School Committee.
What?
Then nothing.
Oh, seconded by Mark Conroy, School Committee.
No, it doesn't say that.
I'm like, what?
Something's got to say they voted.
Yeah, there we go.
That's an easy one.
That one's an easy one.
That was easy. So I want to say before we adjourn.
So the minutes were, you didn't make a motion to approve the minutes? as
Approve those
amended?
minutes with the change.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. Second, then. I was.
All in favor,
That's
say
the
aye.
10th.
Aye.
Yeah, I think that the 127 is a really important one to look at because it is part of a bigger conversation about coordination across town departments that are affected. Our next meeting is actually next Monday, which is out of order of the alternating Monday cycle. And it is a daytime or sunshine meeting. It's at 2 o'clock, so we hope that that will bring out more people. We will be hearing from the town administrator and the finance director with respect to their budgets for fiscal year '21, because they did not have an opportunity to present during the budget hearing. We will obviously be making a decision on pickleball tennis court gate, and I don't remember the other, there's a couple of other good things.
It'll be a full agenda.
Full agenda, okay. So, 135 years ago today, the Boston Pops was formed, the Statue of Liberty arrived in New York City, and Dr. Pepper was formed, Toothbrush was formed, we got evaporated milk, and the town of Millis was incorporated. So I just...
Pina colada drink? Oh, no, that
And
was
you
it.
did. So I just want to note that the seal indicates February 24th, 1885, and say happy 135th birthday to the town of Millis, and long may she look great, and long may we all enjoy our community. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I think I would allow the clerk the privilege of making this motion.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We'll see everybody next Monday at 2 o'clock. Thank you very much for your time and attention.